Smart.
I'm gonna crack open a cold one.
Listen
I
to
feel
that
weird.
cracking old cold.
I feel weird a little bit drinking alcohol while we talk about a movie about recovery from alcohol addiction a bit.
Right?
Seems in poor taste.
I bought a lot of alcohol for New Year's
Eve. Yeah.
Valid. What is it?
It's Angry Orchard Hardcore.
Ooh.
Nice.
I don't know if you've had these, but they're dark cherry apple flavored. And for one, they're just delicious. I really like them.
I love dark cherry so much.
But also they have
enjoyed most Angry Orchards that I've had, honestly. I love the sour one.
Yeah. But they have 8% alcohol per volume or whatever. Which is stronger than their normal stuff. Yeah. And so it tastes delicious and you also get a nice buzz.
I had a beer last night that was, it claimed itself to be a pumpkin spice latte flavored ale, but then I drank it and it tasted straight up like a pumpkin pie. Like this was not a spice blend. This shit had pumpkin in it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was very odd.
Was it Johnny Rails?
It was not. It was unfortunately not Johnny Rails. I wish
Johnny Rails is really good, though.
It is.
That's my
No, this was
favorite
from
thing.
Left Hand Brewing, I think.
That's my favorite thing because I wrote the Off the Air fan fiction.
Oh, that's right. Johnny Rails was in there.
And I put Johnny Rails in there and I was like looking up local like brews and I just found Johnny Rails and I thought it was the stupidest fucking thing. And
or did Johnny Rails find you?
and so I threw it in there and I love referencing it every once in a while.
It's great.
It's so good.
It's also a good beer. Like that's the best part. Is the stuff is actually good too.
Do we want to clap?
We should.
So, firstly, I think that actually should be our intro because that was really good.
Okay.
But I'll still tell my story. 3, 2, 1. There's just this dude. I call him Boogie Bezos.
So you're telling me. I think we should use that other thing we were talking about as
and
the
then you
pre-roll,
open
and then
Boogie Bezos.
I think it's important to mention we call him Boogie Bezos. This is not necessarily a name.
Right, this isn't a widely used nickname.
No, it is.
Oh. It is now.
It is so that's someone that the other members of our friend group had seen while out at this club. That they had kind of given this nickname because of how he boogied.
They just call him Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, well, and then
I call him Boogie Bezos, and I think it's going to catch on.
I think it has
it's way cooler.
On.
But why?
It is.
Because he's at this club every time we've been there. He's having a great time, and he's bald.
Mm-hmm. And he's wearing a businessman attire that he ditches through the course of the night.
Yes, nice.
As the night goes on, the button-up comes off, and he's just there in a beater. And as he really gets going, he untucks the beater. And then if he really gets going, he tugs on it for a second, and then all of a sudden the shirt's gone. You don't actually know where it went. And he's going.
He just grabs it from the front and rips it directly off. Really
I
fast.
would believe that if I didn't see him put it back on like 18 different times throughout the night.
Oh.
Different shirts.
Interesting. So is he
takes it off,
showing up directly from work or something?
He must.
Because what kind of person wears those kind of clothes to go clubbing?
Mm-hmm.
No.
I say having never gone clubbing in my life. I don't know what people wear when they do that kind of stuff.
So that he can strip.
It seems like he's living his best life.
Okay.
I have a lot of respect
good for him.
I dream to have that kind of energy at that age. And when I said that to someone, they're like, cocaine. And I'm like, I don't think that's the case
from the
for
tone
Boogie
of voice,
Bezos.
From the tone of voice, I know who said that to you.
Yes, you do.
With a name like Boogie Bezos, I would assume cocaine is a given now.
Honestly, that sounds like a coke
either
dealer
cocaine
name, right?
Or raw, unfiltered zest for life.
Yeah.
It's really hard
I thought you were saying
which.
lemon zest for a second. Like he's just
raw,
huffing lemon
unfiltered
zest all night.
lemon zest.
That's why he's got that look on his face the whole time because he's making the He's making the breakdown stank face the entire time he's dancing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no. Frank Zappa called that the "ow, ow, I'm dancing" face. So
yeah,
this isn't somebody you like personally know and communicate with, though, right?
Never ever seen him outside of the dance floor at the club.
Okay,
he lives there.
Next time you see him, I'm begging you. You have to go up to him and be like, "Hi, excuse me. I'm so sorry. My name's Noah. I just wanted to let you know my friends and I have been referring to you as Boogie Bezos because we see you boogieing down constantly, and we think you're cool."
I feel like if
somebody came
first, though.
Well, if somebody came up to me and was like, "Oh, hey, just so you know, my friends and I have noticed you, and we have dubbed you the coolest nickname on earth."
Okay, so I have even better news for you.
Okay.
The Can't Stop the Feeling from Trolls 2 came on, and the floor cleared.
Mm-hmm.
No one was on for that song, except for Boogie Bezos.
Hell yeah.
And Nina's coworker, who jumped down to dance as a joke, and then came back to me and said, "Me when the Trolls 2 soundtrack comes on." I mean, come on, you see that? They cleared the whole floor with that. And I'm like, man, it's just you and Boogie Bezos. You got to go out there. It's just you and him. And he's like, oh, you think? And here I thought he was just going to dance out there with him, being the only people on the floor.
Right.
No, he went within 6 inches of Boogie Bezos and tried to mimic every dance move he did. They danced together for the whole song.
That is the only correct thing to do.
They bumped into each other a few times because, Bezos, he's spinning, he's dropping, he's doing a whole thing. He's got a routine going on.
The real moves. Yeah. When you got space to do it, you got to whip those out.
Yeah,
exactly. And when the song ended, he turns to the side, and just gives this guy a big bear hug and says, "Yeah," and then went back to dancing.
Sounds like they're
so
best
we have
friends
interacted
already.
with him.
I love that.
Best friends.
Yeah, I mean, when the floor is down to just 2 people, that's when it's the most important. Just like mosh pits.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Punch you in the face because we got to keep it going, not because I want to.
I mean, like,
it's a brotherly punch in the face.
The 2-person mosh pits that I've been a part of in the past was mostly just the 2 of us like running in circles around each other and then like into each other.
A truly good mosh pit.
Which was a good time. It was a great show. The band was absolutely killing it. It's just, it was at the end of a very long night, so we were the only ones still going because we were young and dumb enough to do it.
I love that.
You were young and unafraid, as the Monster Camp Prom games would say.
Yep.
So true.
And really, really hurting the next day.
Everyone, and welcome to Casual Obsession, the horror movie podcast where we talk about horror movies. I am one of your hosts, Nina.
I'm another of your hosts, Emma.
We introduce the other hosts now, Nina. I'm Noah.
Yeah, we've made some changes to the order, which we always follow perfectly. I should know, I've always been here as the host, Jeff.
So true.
And today, as we are all here, we're talking about the 2019 sequel to The Shining, Dr. Sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when the book for Dr. Sleep came out because I had not read anything by King at the time, but I was very well aware of The Shining's like cultural influence.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing the book and being like, that's an interesting title. And then reading it was a sequel to The Shining. And I was like, why would he make a sequel to The Shining? I was like, I had never read the book, never seen the movie, and I was viscerally annoyed that he made a sequel.
Yeah,
no, it seemed like the dumbest decision.
I remember when I found out about it, I was hanging out in a bookstore with our mutual friend Jackson because he was buying manga, and I was just kind of there. And we saw it there, and he was like, oh yeah, that's like Stephen King's new like sequel to The Shining. And I, having only seen the movie like maybe once, was just kind of like, oh, well, why would he do that after all this time? That's pretty bad and stupid, and that title isn't good. And
yeah. I didn't know about the sequel until I started seeing trailers for the movie.
Oh.
And then I found out that it was like a sequel to The Shining, a movie that I had not seen at the time and only knew through kind of cultural absorption, I guess you could say. And I was like, that's really weird. And from the trailers, it was shot very much to be kind of like an action horror movie kind of, which was like really weird. And I was like, that just looks really weird and bad. And spoiler for my summary, but it's not weird and bad. It's weird and good.
No.
Right, yeah.
I will say
and the title is way better than I gave it credit for as well.
Yeah.
When you get into it and see why that's the title, then yes.
I personally felt like when the title was dropped, I'm like, that's a Stephen King bullshit moment.
Personally. 100%. I will say that with the plot of this movie and like as a like basis, we're starting Flanuary. A sequence where we're going to be talking about movies directed by the podcast kind of collective favorite director, Mike Flanagan. We've talked about some of his stuff before, specifically his TV shows, but I think that any other director, especially having read some of his like thoughts on the production of this movie and some of the efforts that he went to make it what it is, I don't think this movie could have been made by anyone else and come out as good as it is.
Not
I think
like this
is no. I think the movie being because I really love this movie, being the powerhouse that it is entirely because of Flanagan and his like heart and passion that he put into it.
Yeah.
Which is something I don't think I have ever said about a King adaptation, and I may never say again.
Yeah. I mean, I love our friend Mike Flanagan.
Yeah.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
But
also, hi, Daryl, if you're still here.
If you're still here, Daryl. Hi, Daryl. So Mike Flanagan, we talked about on the Shining episode a little bit. He wrote a long Tumblr post about kind of his experience directing Dr. Sleep and how it came to be and everything. And it's an incredibly good Tumblr post. All of his
we will
Tumblr
have it linked
posts
in the show notes.
Oh, great. All of his Tumblr posts are goated. Highly recommend them. But one of the things he talked about was he originally went into Warner Bros. To talk about directing a DC movie. And that didn't really work out. But the conversation naturally kind of drifted to Dr. Sleep. And there was a script floating around already. Or not really a script, but kind of like a pitch floating around. And the executive who he was talking to was like, "Oh, have you read it? What do you think?" And Mike was like, "I've read it. I would do things differently," and kind of like pitched what he would do to kind of unite like Stephen King's version and Kubrick's version into like a singular narrative and kind of paying homage to both and doing that whole thing. And just kind of like I fucking love like his passion for like both works as like very notable works of fiction, and wanting to like honor both of them. And I feel like he fucking nailed it, and he just did such a good job. And I love the boy so much.
Did.
I mean, without having read both books, it kind of seems like that's difficult to judge. But like, given the differences that we're all aware of between the book The Shining and the movie The Shining, to try and make a movie that is functionally a sequel to both seems like an impossible task. And yet he pulled it off. So
that's absolutely why the Tumblr post is like, I definitely recommend reading it, because I definitely think that we cannot do it justice. You should get the words from him.
Yeah. But
like, he worried so much about King's opinion of the movie. He put a lot of care into making sure that it was a good like adaptation and sequel to both. And I think that like sorry, I lost my train of thought.
So true.
No worries.
I think you
go for it.
Yeah, sorry. I think you don't have to read the books to know, just from his account of things and King's approval, that this is kind of the definitive like way that the like, as far as a movie adaptation goes, and as far as like being a succinct telling of these characters' stories, this is as good as it could possibly get. And like King acknowledged that, and I'm really glad that Flanagan got that acknowledgement.
Yeah.
God, there's a line in there that King says he loved this movie so much it even made him warm up to Kubrick's Shining, which is an insane achievement from a man who has widely shit-canned that movie
for 40
since
years.
it came out.
Yeah.
I think that this movie, the way that it like paints the events of the Shining movie and how those specific events, the way that those events transpired, would have affected Danny and would have affected like the future of Danny's life. I think that that's like, if I hated the original Shining, maybe part of the reason why I liked The Shining so much and didn't really have as much of an issue with it as a book adaptation is because I'd seen Dr. Sleep already. And I knew how the story ended. So the things that were different didn't bother me as much because I was already looking at it with the eyes that Stephen King would warm up to.
Yeah.
I mean, we touched on it a little bit, but we didn't want to get into it here, and we'll get back to the main format for the episode in just a second. Of course, don't worry.
We're just so excited.
I know everyone's really excited about the format, but we're not right now. But
we're known for our formatting.
One of the things I really like about the fact that the Overlook is still standing in this one is because we get to see it's actually more thematic of the conversation that King was trying to have of, recovery and everything like that in the second book, showing that because Jack was unable to complete his duties in the first one, which, King did not care for at the time. Now it turns into because of his failings, Danny's also on the same path, but he got to finish what Jack started and actually like make a positive change and difference. And that's just I love the ending of this movie so much.
It's like, it's so interesting. And this will be the last thing before we actually get into the format.
That's not true. I have another thing.
Okay. It's interesting that because this movie was created, unlike The Shining, this movie was created knowing what The Shining movie would do. The book Shining tried to tell its story all at once, and King also didn't know that he was going to write a sequel necessarily. Right. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But this movie exists knowing that the book exists and knowing how the book told the story and knowing that how the movie told the story. And because of that, I think that it's able to tell a more impactful version where that like generational trauma is discussed, which it wouldn't have been in the book or in the Shining book as well as it is in these two movies, because there was no way to have that foresight, in my opinion. So that's kind of what I think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. To kind of further talk about some points that Noah was kind of talking around or referencing, but not directly calling out. In the Tumblr post, Exhibit A, we'll call it, Mike talked about how, so basically he gave the pitch to the Warner Brothers executive, and the executive immediately like emailed Stephen King and was like, hey, Mike Flanagan, who King was aware of and liked because of Gerald's Game, and he really liked that adaptation, was interested in doing like Dr. Sleep, and like King was like, hell yeah, go for it. And so when Mike first reached out to King and was talking about, I want to bring back the hotel and kind of like do this as a continuation of Kubrick's film, it was an immediate no from Stephen King. And then Mike reached out again and was talking about like, I just want you to picture for a moment like the hotel as just this very worn, decrepit building, and Danny walking around it, bringing it back to life, and like these lights coming up, and then going to the gold room and sitting at the bar and having a conversation with his dad, and like all these other things. And then from that pitch, Stephen King being like, do it. And I think just purely from like a visual medium perspective, because in the book, from what I understand, the final confrontation happens at like this campground that used to be the Overlook Hotel. And imagining in a film kind of a campground versus like the grand set pieces that we do get of the Overlook Hotel And I feel like it's just so much stronger because of it. And we got to kind of like circle around and kind of like close that story. It's just so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's I love it a lot.
Good.
Also, I love the visual touches of the way that the stuff in the hotel is filmed. Anyways, moving forward.
Yeah. So Nina, now that we've talked about the end of the movie a lot, do you want to give
tell us the beginning?
Because to reference the Tumblr post one more time, one thing that Flanagan had said was that King read the first half of the script and was like, hey, I'm busy, I haven't finished it yet, but it's great so far. And Flanagan was like, oh, the end is what he's gonna hate though.
Yeah.
But we have talked a lot about the end, and the beginning has a lot of good stuff too, so we can get into it here. So obviously you guys know Dr. Sleep is the sequel to The Shining, but did you know it follows Danny Torrance as an adult, kind of getting his life back together as he's followed his kind of dad's path into alcoholism, and he has hit some very deep lows. He finds himself in a very small town as a hospice orderly, where his shining kind of accidentally comes into play a lot as he meets a lot of people who are dying. Also, his shining comes into play when he starts getting messages on the wall of his apartment from a unknown source. Meanwhile, out in the world, we know there's some evil forces at play, killing kids and stealing their shine. And with that, that's basically all you need to know. If you think that it sounds fun, you should watch it because it's really good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I am really curious. So in the Tumblr post, Exhibit A, Mike Flanagan talked about when he was first showing this movie, because before they showed everybody, they had a special screening for it with Stephen King. And then also they sent it off to the Kubrick estate, and both King and the Kubrick estate really loved the film and told Mike as such. And he was like, we won that battle. I don't care if the movie bombs at this point. Like, the fact that both of these kind of people really enjoyed it is everything. And then the movie bombed. And,
oh no.
Bombed real bad.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It was not a financial
much like The
success.
Shining did.
Yeah.
Well, right. Yeah. The Shining did actually do pretty poorly in theaters. Yeah. We didn't talk about that last time.
After the first weekend, Stephen King sent Mike an email and was like, hey, I'm reminded of when The Shining bombed in theaters, and but eventually it kind of found its audience. It became this huge thing. And he's like, I don't want you to feel disheartened because this is such a good movie. It will absolutely find its audience. And it really has, because Mike said that the VOD sales and digital sales and everything have been spectacular, especially with the release of the director's cut, which Warner Brothers was kind enough to like let kind of become a thing. But I am curious because Mike talked about he wasn't sure how the movie would be received critically, because he felt like it was very possible Kubrick fans would hate the movie because it was too close to like the book, and King fans would hate it because it's too close to Kubrick. And so I've actually been super curious what the critical reception of the movie was when it came out.
It's honestly, it's a quite disappointing set of numbers I'm about to read you. I know. Metacritic. No, I'm not going to jump to Metacritic. I'm going to go in order like I always do. IMDb is a 7.3.
Not bad.
Rotten Tomatoes is a 78.
Okay.
I'm going to save Metacritic for last.
Oh, God, I'm so
Letterboxd
scared.
is a 3.4 out of 5, which would be a 68%.
Mm-hmm.
And Metacritic swinging in low with a 59.
Metacritic is always coming in with the low numbers. God.
Yeah.
IMDb is normally like pretty low as well, so I'm kind of surprised that it's in the 7s, but that is definitely lower than it deserves.
It tends IMDb tends to skew low for anything that's not a big blockbuster thing.
Well, yeah.
Superhero movies are kind of the only ones that get really up there anymore, and it's mostly because IMDb is kind of like the people's poll at this point. Letterboxd is kind of that, but luckily, only pretentious asshats are on Letterboxd.
Like yourself.
Exactly. But speaking of pretentious asshats, Twitter Brandon saw this.
Hey, Twitter Brandon.
I Yeah, I want to guess. Do you think Twitter Brandon liked it as a noted fan of The Shining?
Right.
Or do you think he did not like it?
That's a good question. I
can't guess because I've already read what he said.
Yeah, I don't know that I believe in Twitter Brandon.
Yeah, that's the big thing, right?
That's such a reasonable stance.
Yeah. So when we're talking about director's cuts, a lot of times what that means for movies is like they add, or like extended editions or whatever, they add maybe like 5 to 10 minutes of scenes. Whereas like this movie adds
an entire
close to 20 to 30 minutes. Yeah. Yep. Which turns it into almost a completely different movie. So I think I would imagine if Twitter Brandon saw a version, he saw the theatrical version.
That would be correct.
I'm gonna lean towards he didn't like it.
I feel like we haven't heard Twitter Brandon's opinion on movies that he likes often enough for me to be able to pick out whether he will like a movie. But I am...
Even if you've heard everything he's ever said, you will still never be able to accurately guess that.
Ambulance is like number 8 of his top 10.
I thought that I trusted him.
This is weird.
Now,
I have heard Ambulance is actually a really good movie.
Yeah, who was it that was in Ambulance? I feel like I saw a trailer for it.
Jake Gyllenhaal.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's why I forgot about it so fast. Because
it came out in like
why
February,
would I bother remembering a movie that Jake Gyllenhaal was in?
It's
and
a
it
flash in the
wasn't Prince of Persia?
pan Michael Bay action movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Which means that it's probably perfectly fine for what it is, but like...
Yeah.
Exactly. And what it is the genre that Brandon...
explosions.
Twitter Brandon will go to bat for schlocky action movies in a way that I just don't really understand, but like good for him.
Somebody has
Anyway,
to.
What Twitter Brandon said about Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, what'd he say?
Okay.
Dr. Sleep is a masterpiece, and I'll unfollow anyone who says it's terrible. I don't give a shit. Snorting out the nose emoji.
Why is it that he has such bad takes, and then every now and then he goes really hard on something correct? Like, what?
That's what I'm saying. Right when you think you've got him nailed, he will kick you in the balls.
I am fully ready for him to just have the worst opinion I've ever heard constantly, and then he hits us with this. Like, okay. Where's this coming from, Brandon?
That Mike Flanagan was able to make a sequel to a great film and a great novel, both very different from one another, make both parts feel whole, and get a great movie out of a terrible novel is nothing short of remarkable. So this also tells me he did not like Dr. Sleep, the book.
He really didn't like the book. Wow.
Yeah.
That's good to know, because I actually do trust that opinion, because I don't like Stephen King on the best of days.
Sure.
So.
My mom likes Stephen King books, and it makes me want to actually go read some of them.
Your mom likes the Outlander series.
Oh, are they not good?
I love your mom. They're good, but it's like
Scotland erotica.
It is just Scotland. It's Scotland erotica.
That's her thing. So like,
Scott Rock.
Your mom likes the Bible. So
she does. She does also like the Bible. I like the Bible sometimes. It's just I don't read it the same way I used to.
Not as much as I used to.
I appreciate it very differently than I did before.
Also, Twitter Brandon did review this one on Letterboxd.
I thought you were going to say that he reviewed the Bible.
He did.
He's got tweets.
Bookboxed.
Bookboxed.
One of the things that the only thing he said in his Letterboxd review is that Alex Aso did an amazing job of doing Shelley Duvall.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Actually, yes.
Holy shit!
I'm so excited to talk about that later.
I love the casting in this movie.
Okay.
I've said I've loved this movie a lot, so I'm going to add a number to it. I'm going to go with a 9 out of 10.
Yeah,
9 out of 10.
I'm going to go with a 9 out of 10. I bumped it down from a 10 out of 10 the first time I saw it because on a rewatch, I've now seen the movie 2.5 times.
So this is a 10-star Noah movie.
This is 10-star Noah movies get bumped down to like a 6.
Technically, this is a 10-star Noah movie because you gave it 10 and you're bumping it down. So
bumping it down to 9. If I did halves, it would be a 9.5. It's just I don't know. There was something about it that didn't sit with me. It didn't hit me the same way. Yeah, I don't do halves because I do like full number values because I go in a scale of 5. I go from half star to 5 star. It doesn't translate to halves in the 10-star sense.
Oh, okay.
That's valid.
Fair enough.
But you're saying it just didn't like kind of capture something.
It absolutely wowed me the first time I saw it, and I've realized that I need to do this more, is watch a really good movie once every couple months to reset my brain so I can remember what a truly good movie is, because this movie is nothing if not a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
It is shot beautifully. It has generally good music, and that's like actually my only beef is every now and then the music doesn't land for me. It has amazing actors across the board. The movie just really hits, and it sits at a level. It's funny that this movie bombed and it did amazing, and I know it did well because the child actors were out of this world.
Oh,
yeah.
sure.
But this movie is so much better than It Chapter 1. It's not even funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
A whole different class.
It tells a different story, and I don't want to compare the stories in that way, but it tells its story better than it does, which we have torn the It movies apart and put them back together. Okay.
The
Dr. Sleep
It
told its own story better than it told its story. Yeah.
Yes.
I got you.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I think...
Which is an opinion I think we have all pretty heavily exhibited when we talked about It.
Absolutely.
Is that there's just a few changes we would all make.
Yeah. I think when it comes to comparing this movie and It, we hinted at this briefly before, but I think the marketing really hurt this movie's theatrical run.
It did.
I'm sure.
Which when it comes to marketing, and I think about like how I would have done it, I think it's just kind of like a hard movie in general to market for. Because
how do you market for the sequel to a book that people already thought the movie was fine, they don't want another one, and almost unanimously we all agreed, why does that book exist?
Yeah. And I think like thematically, it's also very different from the original Shining, so it's like hard to like kind of pitch to the nostalgic feeling of the original movie.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
Like you can't lean into the Shining stuff in your marketing because that's not what the movie is.
No.
Yeah.
No. That would also be extremely misleading.
Yeah, that would be wrong.
Yeah. But I'm glad that it's done so well post its theatrical run.
It deserves it, yeah.
Because it absolutely deserves it. It's an incredible movie.
So what's your rating?
I think...
Yeah, what's your rating?
Yeah, great question.
Thanks, that's why I asked it.
Yeah. So this is the second time I've watched the movie. The first time I watched its theatrical release, I didn't see it in theaters, but I saw that cut.
Right.
And originally I was watching the theatrical cut again yesterday, the day before we started reviewing or doing this episode.
Yeah.
Which, for context, was last year.
Yeah, yes. It was December 31st. So I watched...
Which is actually relevant to the story.
Yeah, I watched the first half of the movie, and then I was like, okay, I was hosting like a movie marathon for people yesterday.
Oh, nice.
For New Year's Eve. That just didn't have anything to do. And so watched the first half, and I was like, I'll watch the second half tomorrow before we record. And I knew there was a director's cut, but it wasn't streaming anywhere. I would have had to pay like $7 to buy it or rent it or whatever. And so I was like, I'll just watch the theatrical cut.
Yeah.
Then I sat down to finish it today, and HBO fucking removed it overnight.
Yo.
And I was like, what's this bullshit?
New year, no movies, apparently.
Yeah. I just decided to like, I was like, if I'm going to have to pay money either way to like rent it or buy it, then I'll shell out the extra like $2 for the director's cut.
Yeah.
And I'm very glad I did. Watching it this time around, I think I enjoyed it a lot more. But also I just paired with, you know how like you'll pair fine wine with like various meals or whatever. I feel like pairing it with the Mike Flanagan Tumblr post is just really great and kind of adds to the story of the movie. And I love it a lot. So I'm going to give it like a 9.5.
Nice. Well, and
Yeah.
hearing how you talk during the Shining episode, when we were watching because I've only ever seen the director's cut. So we watched Dead Meat's cut comparison afterward, just in case you didn't manage to see the director's cut, and I know Jeff didn't.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure that when I'm talking about things, I know whether or not you guys actually saw that part.
Yeah.
And while we're watching the cut comparison, I'm like, man, I really hope Emma watched the director's cut, because everything she said in The Shining about Jack, how everything that like kind of addresses that happens in the director's cut, which is part of like what makes it such a good story. And I'm so glad that Flanagan was able to do that, because there's specific things that he says that at least Danny has internalized, if nothing else, that make are the things that make The Shining like work so well with this one. But they're only in the director's cut, which, you know, I wanted you to see that because it was stuff that you specifically brought up. Yeah.
I was very glad. We were not arguing, but we were talking a lot about what time to like record our podcast at.
Yeah.
And when I realized HBO took off Dr. Sleep from their catalog, and I had to kind of start over, and I was like, I'll just watch the director's cut. I was like, give me like 4 hours so I can like accurately watch this. And I'm very glad it worked out that we were able to do this, because I loved the scenes that were added and just the content that was added. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Audience, if you have an option, definitely watch the director's cut.
Definitely.
It's absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
Jeff, you too. I'll let you borrow my copy.
Yes,
I want to get around to it because I watched the Dead Meat cut comparison video, and it seems like the additions are all really good things.
When I first watched this movie and we finished it, I was like, that was the director's cut, because I legitimately could not think of a single scene except for the bathroom scene that could have been removed at all, and the story would have still made sense.
Yeah.
Because in my head, I'm like, all of that was necessary to tell a full story. And while understanding what was added, like, I don't think that you like missed out too much.
Sure.
I do think that like it's definitely the definitive version as far as getting like all of the characters fully.
Yeah.
But yeah, with that in mind, my rating is also a 9.5 out of 10. And the 0.5 is also for the music and a little bit for Abra's acting. There's some line delivery in there where I'm just like, kids. But that was it.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Makes sense.
See, in my experience watching the theatrical cut, a lot of the like missing information and stuff just kind of lent it this air of like mystery and ambiguity that like at first kind of annoyed me a little bit, but then I was like, hey, wait a minute, I liked it when Stanley Kubrick did that. Why don't I like it when Mike Flanagan does that? And then I liked it magically. So
tricking
literally
yourself
just
into
looking at it differently like
power.
that. Yeah, like literally just looking at it differently like that. I was just like, oh yeah, this actually fucks. Like,
yeah.
So
this whole movie fucks so hard. I can't wait to talk about it.
There is so much cool stuff in here. So for a lot of it, I like the way that a lot of it was shot. I love an awful lot of the music. I understand how it wouldn't be hitting for, in a lot of certain moments and stuff, but I don't think I had any moments where the music was a problem for me. Largely because so much of it is reusing music from The Shining, and I fucking love the soundtrack of that movie. It's so good.
I will tell you the points that it didn't hit for me specifically.
Okay. Yeah.
Like later. But
so basically, though, I'm going to give it a 9 just so that I have room to bump it up when I watch the director's cut, because I need to have somewhere to go with that. But like, this is really good. I liked it a lot.
I'm so glad you liked it, because of the four of us, you were the only one that hadn't watched this movie.
Right. Yeah.
We were talking about this before the podcast, actually.
So I was so excited to like have you watch this and to hear what you thought, and to hear you liked it is nice.
Mike has yet to let me down, really. Like,
I love Mike.
All the issues that I had with Gerald's game came
you.
directly from the source material, very obviously.
Literally.
So like none of that was him.
Right. Well, I'm also really glad you liked it because we talked about this. You predicted a lot of the lore about certain characters in certain situations. Like you were like just spitballing the whole time. I was biting my tongue because I'm like, that's literally confirmed. So with that in mind, let's spoil this baby.
Let's go.
Yeah, because we haven't done that yet.
Well, we've got
not
trigger
at all.
warnings first.
We do.
Oh yeah, we
Oh,
do,
right, yeah.
and there are
Yeah.
some for this.
Yeah, we got
movie.
some
There are
kids
definitely
getting
some.
murdered.
Yep, we got
Kids-
child murder.
And torture.
And torture.
And torture.
And just miscellaneous neglectful death.
Yeah.
A lot of bad shit for kids in this one.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's
Not as
not
bad
a
as It.
kid-friendly movie.
Quite as bad as It. But this movie hates kids.
I would say more disturbing than It, though,
Easily.
because the
Oh,
first
sure.
child death is definitely the
It's
okay,
rough.
I say the first, and then I remember Baseball Boy exists. There's a lot of really rough stuff in this movie with kids.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that, and maybe one of you has heard the same thing and can confirm this with me, but the baseball kid death scene was originally like 10 to 15 minutes longer. Which
like
is
longer
fucking
than it is in the
brutal.
director's cut, even.
Yes.
Yeah, longer than in the director's cut. They shot so much for that scene that the kid, from all accounts, as soon as they yelled cut, was like, wow, this is so much fun. And every adult on set was having an atrocious time because
Oh my God.
for the baseball kids scene, cannot emphasize enough
Holy shit.
how incredibly upsetting this kid has done his job. It's
Yeah.
like it's very
Yeah.
very
It's
raw.
visceral.
He was
It's
so good.
killing it while they were killing
yeah.
him. Holy shit.
Like,
Absolutely.
the screaming
Whoa.
sounds he made,
Mm.
you would think they were actually killing a kid on set. It was
Yeah.
actually insane.
Take that, Kubrick. You don't have to abuse anyone to get
Yeah.
that
Right?
level
Yeah,
of
this is a
acting out of
kid
them.
even.
That was a child.
Yeah.
That was a
That kid-
child.
That kid was incredible because
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there's a lot of times with child actors where they're crying or like acting fear or various
just
other
doesn't
things.
hit.
It's like not quite hitting.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. No,
when this kid is like begging
He's
and when he's
going.
like, "Are you gonna hurt me?" and they're like, "Yeah." And he
Yeah.
starts
That
like
was so
crying.
good.
It's
Okay,
so
okay.
fucking real and
It
it's
is.
haunting.
Yeah.
It's so good.
goosebumps in
One
a
of my
bad
favorite
way.
scenes in
Absolutely.
horror.
It's
Other
incredible.
things.
Oh, other content warnings though.
oh, right.
We have
Non-child
substance
related
abuse,
stuff.
heavy
Yeah.
substance abuse.
Massive.
Substance
Huge.
abuse. Yeah.
We have family conflict, a carryover from the first movie. Still
Yeah.
here a little bit, you know.
Um,
I jotted down predatory behavior just because of how the true knot behaves.
Yeah, there's some
That makes sense.
grooming,
I agree.
Not cool people.
Mind control.
mind
My
control.
mom has a hard time with that, and so I want to be sure to
Okay.
shout that out. Love
Mind
you, Mom.
control,
Yeah.
possession.
Hey, Emma's mom, you might not want to watch this one.
Yeah, watch
And
out
then
there.
my favorite, which we will be addressing for a future Flanagan film as well, degloving.
Oh,
God, I forgot about
Mike
that.
loves hitting us with the degloving, doesn't he?
And it's so bad every
He's good
time.
at them.
Thanks, Mike.
He's
He
too
did
good
say
at
in the
them.
Tumblr post,
Hot
he's
damn.
like, I love a good fucked up hand scene.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
glad he
Mike,
actually
we
said
can-
that,
we
'cause,
know,
like,
Mike.
we're noticing.
Love you, Mike. Why would
There's
you do
two
that?
themes that I noticed in his work, and it's that someone cheats on their spouse and he loves to take all the skin off of your hand.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
waiting for him to
Oh,
address
okay.
the other one.
The themes that I've noticed in all of Mike Flanagan's work is like family dynamics, monologues about death, and fucked up hands.
Yeah,
Mike
yeah.
loves a monologue about death.
He loves a monologue about death, and
There's
we
a
get
few in
some in
here.
this movie. Okay, I'm going to talk about them now. So,
Well, no.
No, you're not.
There's one last thing.
okay.
There's two
One
last
last
things
thing.
because
One
I have
last
one more
content
trigger
to warn.
warning.
Oh, okay.
I have one last content to warn. And I'm not gonna because this is like a spoilery thing, so I don't want to like clarify it at all. But suicide.
Oh, yeah.
mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Jeff,
we-
did you have another
yeah.
one?
Nope.
Okay, cool. And then before Nina gets into their spoiler overview, we're gonna do a scary rating.
How
This
scary is
movie-
Scary
this movie?
rating.
Yeah, this movie, God, like they show a lot of the bad guys to the point where you're not actively afraid of the bad guys constantly. But when fucked up shit happens in this movie, fucked up shit happens.
Yeah.
And it's wild. And so I'm gonna give it like a 4.
Okay,
that's super fair.
If you're afraid, or if you really have a hard time with harm happening to children, this movie's not for you.
Yeah.
Because there are some hard scenes.
There are.
But yeah, I think overall a 4 is pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay. So with that, talking about how the villains didn't actually like scare you. Remember when we watched New Mutants? This is a better X-Men horror movie
my God.
than that.
Oh, absolutely.
I was going to bring that up, and I'm so mad you drew the same comparison.
Of all the things that I was going to compare it to,
like...
I hadn't even thought about comparing it to X-Men, but that works.
Yeah. I'm so mad you thought of this too, Nita.
It's me, the person who has Wolverine in their screen name. It's on the brain at all times. Okay, so with that in mind, that is kind of how we'll lead into this, because this movie has like 3 main point of view characters, and we flip around through all 3 of them pretty constantly. And I'm counting the True Knot like as a whole as a POV character here. So it's going to be hard to give a recap of this because I don't want to go, and then we cut to so-and-so, and then we cut to so-and-so. So we'll see how this goes. I'm winging it. Bear with me.
I believe in you.
So when we left off, I said there were some creepy people who have been stealing kids' shines. That is the True Knot, led, it seems, by Rose the Hat, who is so pretty.
She's so hot.
And so evil.
The prettiest.
More like Rose the Hot.
Hey, yo.
Hey, yo.
Rose is shown pretty early on to be pretty ruthless. The True Knot is a group of kind of life force feeding like vampires. And they have harvested from kids because it seems like kids have the purest kind of form of this energy. As they have been looking for kids to harvest, her partner, Crow Daddy, who I also adore, all of the True Knot have the shine. And Crow Daddy's specific shine manifests in that he's able to find other people who have the shine as well. He's found someone, and he takes Rose to show her. And Rose is like, that's cool and all, but isn't the point to eat these people? And he's like, yeah, for sure, but watch this. The kid in question is a 15-year-old named Andy, and she can tell people to do things, and then the person will do it. I think they call that she could push people. So this is where the X-Men thing comes in. Right. A lot of these shines exhibit themselves very similarly to superpowers, which is super fun as someone who loves that shit.
Yeah.
But Andy demonstrates her powers by pushing a pedophile who she'd met up with to get him to sleep, steal all his money, and then leave him with a mark on his face of 2 small lines, giving her the nickname Snakebite Andy. Rose is obviously impressed by this because you can imagine if you're trying to get kids to do what you want, having someone who can like mind control is very helpful. So they approach Andy and give her an offer of joining the True Knot, which gives us an opportunity as the audience to see how that happens. They feed her some steam from a kid. Steam is what they call the life force. We see them feed her some from a kid that they killed in the 80s. And Andy she dies, but she comes back, so it's fine. And she is now part of the True Knot, and her powers can be used for evil. I also mentioned earlier in our synopsis that Danny Torrance has been getting messages written on a chalkboard wall in his apartment room. Those messages come from Abra, another person with the shine, who was very young when she first left a message for Danny. But over the 8 years that we have a time skip of, the two have maintained correspondence. And it seems like it's been pretty casual. Like she'll write morning and Danny will write school, and they'll just kind of go about their daily business until Abra receives a vision from the True Knot. The True Knot has kidnapped a boy who is referred to as Baseball Boy. His name is Bradley. Who has a pretty killer shine, and the True Knot is ready to harvest as much steam from him as they can. They take him to this abandoned abandoned chemical plant, I believe, and start absolutely torturing him. This is the scene that is like maybe the hardest to watch, as they do not shy away from anything, and everyone's acting is really great. And Abra kind of witnesses all of this in a dream. She dreams it so hard that she shatters the word murder into Danny's wall across the country, to which he kind of messages her to ask who, and her only response is baseball boy. While she's seeing this, Rose, who is torturing this kid, feels Abra's presence, which kind of leads into what will become a back and forth kind of cat and mouse game between the two. Distressed by the death of Baseball Boy and realizing that there are these monsters out here who want to prey on people with the shine, Abra takes it upon herself to go and find Danny. She says it's really easy to find him. She's kind of like a hound dog. She gets a scent and she just goes for it. She says, "Hey, Danny, if you can help me find Baseball Boy and get his glove, I can do the same thing that I did with you, but with the True Knot, because one of them wore the glove while the kid was being tortured." Danny's like, "That's insane. Absolutely not." And then he does it. He goes with his friend who kind of helped him get set up when he was at his low point, and they do find Baseball Boy's body. Meanwhile, Abra has been kind of poking at Rose the Hat, which is not a great idea. Rose thinks she's got the upper hand and makes it into Abra's kind of like, they have these mind library, mind palace things in this movie, is another thing that people with the shine can do. And Rose shows up in Abra's and tries to leaf through her mind to find some information, and Abra immediately plays the Uno reverse card and does the same thing to Rose. As a result,
this is a terrifying scene.
It is.
It's so good.
Mm-hmm.
The
Abra
way that they
is so
shoot the kind of
in this scene.
She is. The lucid dreaming aspect of like using the shine to locate people and being in each other's like mind libraries is so cool. It feels so real. I love it so much. Anyway, with the ability to now kind of locate or the True Knot, but they don't even need that at this point because the True Knot is coming fucking straight at them. Danny and Abra devise a way to trap them a second time. Crow Daddy's like, "Hey, Rose, we're going to go get this kid because she's got a really powerful shine. Howmstever, your mind has been rifled through, so I'm going to want you to sit this one out because I think you're a liability." And Rose is like, "That sucks. I would really rather not, but fine." This leads everyone except Rose right into a trap set by Danny and Abra. Abra casts kind of an like astral projection of herself to make the True Knot believe that they have found her. And after which Danny and his companion Billy kind of unceremoniously shoot down the entire group of the True Knot, except for Crow Daddy, who was not actually there. He set a trap of his own by sending the rest of the True Knot to where Danny was hiding while he went to Abra's house and was able to kidnap her. This leads to Danny using his shine on the offense for the first time as he takes possession of Abra for just a bit. She's been drugged and can't use her own, and uses his shine to cause a car crash, which kills Crow Daddy. Rose has been able to feel all these deaths through the True Knot force or something, so she is pissed.
I think it is important.
It's a great way to put it.
Rose is also an incredibly powerful shine user. Most of the True Knot are.
Yeah.
They just have their own gimmick.
Yes.
So I think what she's doing is just kind of like watching everyone.
That's fair, yeah. She knows everyone's dead and she's absolutely furious. Danny picks Abra up from the car crash site, and the two of them make their way to Colorado. Abra's like, "Why the fuck are we going to Colorado?" And Danny's like, "Remember that time that you accidentally reached into my mind library and found a maze full of boxes? Let me tell you about the Overlook Hotel."
Holy shit.
He has been locking away the Overlook's ghost because after the Overlook was abandoned, the ghost tried to follow him, and he was taught by Dick Halloran how to lock people away in his mind library. And he has been doing that for decades.
Except
there are a lot of ghosts.
Except that like the saddest part of this is that Dan's mind library is the labyrinth from the Overlook.
The labyrinth from the
where
worst
his dad
place in
froze
his
to death
life.
after chasing him, trying to kill him. That place, that's the spot.
It's tragic.
He's kind of got like two mind libraries, because when Abra first went in, it was in like Jack's writing room. Like
neither room, honestly, a good spot for him to
both
be.
bad
No,
places,
absolutely.
it's still the Overlook.
Right.
Yeah, but like
because the other two that we see are Abra's, which is in her room because she's a kid, of course it is, and Rose's, which is this. She's lived for like centuries, so her mind library is this massive cathedral full of filing cabinets.
It's like a fucking palace.
It's cool. And then meanwhile, Danny's is the place that stunted his growth emotionally, and it's so sad. Anyway, he's going back there for realsies, and he's taking Abra with him. He's like, I have a plan. I think the Overlook is powerful enough that it will fight Rose for us, and we don't have to kind of fucking deal with it. And Abra's like, okay, cool. And Dan's like, I have a stipulation. You are not coming into the Overlook as you're coming in as little as we can help it, because it preyed on me, it preyed on my dad, it will prey on you. So he goes in to kind of wake the place up and make sure that Abra is in there as little as she needs to be. The place does come to life. The lights are turning on slowly, and he makes his way to the gold room where he finds Lloyd, the bartender, except Lloyd doesn't look the same. He looks an awful lot like Jack Torrance. They sit down and have a conversation, and throughout it, Jack denies being Jack as long as he can. It seems like Danny is wearing away at the hotel to get at what he wants, which is a conversation with his dad.
Yeah.
He only gets the frank actual Jack, it seems, for a couple sentences at most before the hotel kind of is just there again.
Which kind of
after this
sorry, it kind of mirrors the way that Jack's conversation with Grady in The Shining went, the way that Grady like denied having ever been the caretaker, and then like eventually kind of like admits to it. I thought that was a really, really neat touch.
It was really cool and really sad, because Danny is trying to connect so hard, describing these horrible things that he remembers. And Jack's just like, I don't know to what you're referring. You must have me confused with someone else. My name is Lloyd. Anyway, after waking the hotel up and luring Rose into the writing room, Rose tries to make Danny an offer in what is one of my she sees Danny and Abra standing on the staircase, and they try for a second to trap Rose in one of the boxes in Danny's mind in a scene that made me laugh out loud till I was almost crying, because she's acting like it's Abra's mind library for a second, and then we slowly see a box like sliding up behind her.
So good.
It was so funny. She does realize before they're able to trap her what's going on, and she realizes that Danny is a very powerful shine user. And she's like, oh, how did we miss you? This whole scene, I'm like, Rose, you dumbass, because she's like they say it out loud. They acknowledge this in the movie. She is being willfully ignorant to the fact that she is not that powerful. She is not that powerful, and she is in a place that can absolutely destroy her. And she gets up near Danny, and Danny lets all the ghosts out. And they very, very easily overtake her after she has kind of clawed Danny up with an axe a little bit, but she goes down hard.
Hard and fast.
That's another fucked up scene.
So fun.
Just the hand inside of her like face skin.
I'm a big fan. That's
crazy.
like, I feel like it's a new ghost shorthand I've been seeing more recently, of like a ghost like
merging
doing
with
that.
you.
And I love that.
I love it.
Yeah.
After they've taken care of Rose, and Danny's made sure that Abra's run the fuck out of there. He wants her out of the hotel, but she doesn't quite make it. She's waiting on him. The hotel turns on Danny, obviously. It's been trying to get him this whole goddamn time. We cut to see Abra, who's been kind of wandering around the hotel. She runs into a few of the ghosts and then into Danny. Now, I haven't talked about this, but Danny, when he was a kid, noticed that his mom wouldn't look him in the eye, and he thought that was because his eyes were too much like Jack's. So he very intentionally changed his eye color to be blue.
Oh.
Sorry, I thought you were going to sneeze.
No.
He changed his eye color to be blue, and then when the hotel, which it does do this, possesses him, one of his eyes turns back to brown. The other is completely whited out.
Actually, this is a director's cut scene,
cut
Jeff,
thing.
that you would have missed. There is a scene where it shows him changing his eye color, but he does reference it in the conversation with Jack at the bar.
Ah.
That might not also be in the
I was
gonna say. But this is something that I loved. Was when the hotel possesses him, one of his eyes does turn brown again. Huh. And he goes and hunts down Abra, and Abra's like, it's the hotel. And Dan's like, the hotel, as Danny is like, you don't know what you're talking about, child. I am an eldritch being, millions of years old, you fucking little bitch.
Stephen King, what's going on here?
Abra is able to...
The
Mike
concept
Flanagan.
of hotels came down from space.
Mike Flanagan, what are you doing here? This is the most Flanagan scene ever, honestly, of just, and also King, of just the Overlook being personified for a split second to shit talk a child and then immediately get its ass kicked again.
Yeah.
Because Abra reveals that Danny turned the boiler on the first thing he did when he arrived there. Danny's able to take control long enough that Abra gets away, and he makes his own way down to the boiler room to do what Jack did in the book, which is set the hotel on fire, dying in the process. In the director's cut, there is a very lovely scene of him and Wendy making eye contact, and his eyes have returned to brown, and they're looking each other in the eye. And it's just really sweet. Abra, on the other hand, after that gut punch, which I always this happened both times I've watched this movie. I'm like, oh no, Danny, I loved you so much. And then it cuts to Abra at home, and Danny, as a ghost, is just chilling. And I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, just lean into the corner. It's like, hey, kids, sorry I did that way.
I forgot that a whole function of this world is that ghosts are a thing, and that Danny is dead, but also fine. And Abra is clear with her mom that she wasn't just talking to nobody, she was talking to Danny, who is still around, and that death is not the end in this universe, going back to the monologue we got earlier. And that is the end of that.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening, everyone. If you want to follow our social...
God, I talked so much in the summary about stuff that I love, but I love this movie.
It's just really good.
It is.
It's really, really good. Once again, want to shout out Alex Iso for Shelley Duvall.
Incredible.
The portrayal
incredible.
of Shelley Duvall, the only thing she doesn't do is have great big eyes.
Yeah.
Like,
I was going to say,
only thing.
Yeah, and even with that.
It's hard. Yeah, it's so hard to capture. You're never going to find an actor who looks exactly like the old actors, right?
Never.
Not at all.
But specifically with the actress who played Wendy, her vocal mannerisms are fucking fantastic.
Absolutely
now,
nailing
Emma,
it.
you watched the beginning of this movie back to back. Is the scene in the theatrical where she comes running out of the motel screaming for Danny in the theatrical?
I think so.
Jeff, do you remember that?
Maybe.
It's right at the beginning.
It's right after
he's
talks
talking
to Dick.
Oh yeah,
he's talking to Dick on the bench,
where
and then
she's running across the
street
road,
calling
and
for him.
he's sitting on the bench,
and
Dick is just
she
giving
goes,
him the box
she's
and stuff,
just calling for Danny.
Yeah,
and it's so perfect because you could have lifted those lines like audio clips from The Shining.
Yeah.
She sounds so dead on.
Yeah, perfect
it's
match.
so good.
And between that and what they
that's
did with her hair and her clothes, it's just she is absolutely perfect.
It's
and I
kind of
feel
like how... Oh, go ahead.
I feel like one thing they really aimed for is rather than finding actors who look similar to the old actors, is finding people who sound like them.
Yes.
I was just about to say that for Jack.
Yeah, similarly for Jack.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I was like, the actor they got for this guy looks similar to Jack Nicholson. But I can definitely tell in certain points, his voice is spot on at times. It kind of goes in and out for him a little bit more than with
He's the one
Wendy.
casting choice that I have a little bit of a criticism for, but even he's good.
Well, I didn't even realize.
Lloyd, so.
Right, that's Lloyd.
That's right. There is an in-world explanation for that to
Yeah.
like even be that way, so it works out.
So I didn't even realize, because I was thinking like, oh, this guy has like a similar vibe to Jack Nicholson a little bit, and the voice is kind of there. But then, like, so when I bought the director's cut of Dr. Sleep, I had to do it on Amazon. And for those of you who have never watched a movie on Amazon, it's really cool because you can like,
they had the thingies.
the X-ray. Yeah.
it'll say like who the actors are in the scene.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that that's Henry Thomas, who plays the dad in Hill House.
Oh, yeah.
And the uncle in
my God.
The uncle in Bly Manor. Yeah.
He was
Yeah, I caught that.
unrecognizable except for
No, they did such a good job.
the scene in the bathroom. You get like one shot where it's like front on. And I was like, wait a second.
I
And he just
recognized
kind
him
of
right
really
away.
disappears. Oh, I absolutely didn't.
I didn't either.
Anytime
but...
that I'm watching a Mike Flanagan anything, I'm always watching out for the people that he hires a lot. So like in the first scene that like Rose the Hat gets introduced, we just hear her voice and we see her from behind wearing the hat and stuff. And my first thought was, oh shit, is that Kate Siegel like already? And then it wasn't. She's not in the movie, but like
no, it's Rebecca Ferguson.
Yeah. Well, but then like when Robert Longstreet shows up, it's the same thing. I was just like, oh hey, is that? Yes, it is. And like that's just what I was looking for the whole movie. So.
Well, there's also
Robert Barry the
Longstreet.
Chunk. Horrific name.
Yeah.
What's with these people's
What are you
names?
talking
They
about?
are
That's
such
an
a
incredible
Stephen
name.
King-ass group of people with these nicknames.
It's the X-Men thing again.
It is.
They all
It
have
is.
like little hero nicknames or villain nicknames, and I love it.
We got Crow Daddy. We
I love
got
Crow
Barry
Daddy.
the Chunk. We
Crow
got
Daddy-
Grandpa Flick. Rose
Crow
the
Daddy,
Hat.
my beloved. I
Andy
can't wait.
the Snake.
There's also
I can't wait to talk about the True Knot and their motivations in here.
Gosh, me too.
Yes, same.
So Catherine Parker, who played I forget her name, but the kind of corrupting ghost in Hill House, who really works on the mom, who's like a 1920s kind of gal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the sister in the black and white episode of Bly Manor, she plays a character in the Knot called Silent Sari, who doesn't have any lines because she's Silent Sari. I just saw like her credited and I was like, wait, what the fuck?
wait a
She's
second.
in this too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the Knot that doesn't speak, they're just like, don't talk Donnie and mute Mike, Silent Sari.
Johnny Tight Lips.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Seen but not heard, Sam.
Tell him to suck a
Yeah,
lemon.
So can I talk about the Knot?
Let's talk about
Let's
the
talk
Knot.
about
the Knot.
I want to
Let's
talk
just
about the
tie
Knot
this
so
knot
bad.
up.
They're
The
so
Knot
cool.
is so fun. I love them as villains. I love the effects. Mike Flanagan, please give more things cat eyes. I don't care how often you do it. It's
He
cool
does that in
every
everything,
time.
good.
but it doesn't get old. The one problem that I
It's
have
so
consistently
cool.
with Mike Flanagan's stuff is, in terms of like visual effects, is like his lighting style is like very distinctive, and I think that's very cool. Like he just, I don't know what it is, but he lights things in a way that like you look at it and you're like, oh, this is Flanagan. Because that's his lighting. But like the one problem that I have with his stuff consistently is when he uses CGI, it's always so obvious.
Oh, yeah.
And this movie doesn't have as much of that as I was afraid of, but it does have a little bit of the cat eye thing is not a
The
problem.
kid in the beginning. The cat eye thing is so
yeah,
cool.
the cat eye
though.
thing is very cool. I love it.
Love it. But my favorite thing is the dynamic between Rose and Crow Daddy as it goes to their opinions of how things should go. Because Rose has the full context and she thinks that Crow Daddy doesn't, but it's very clear that Crow Daddy knows exactly where everything stands. And he is very frustrated with the fact that Rose is not taking any measurable steps to do anything about it. What the True Knot have done is they have overhunted the Shining to near extinction, and they are starving themselves.
Yeah.
Rose is in denial. Crow Daddy mentions something about, oh, I don't know if it's the phones or what, but
Yeah.
I love that.
they know. Like, they know that that they have done this to themselves. Crow Daddy wants them to take some kind of action. Rose is looking for her white whale. And it's so interesting. All of these scenes revolve around that kind of dynamic of Rose wanting to continue to live out these glory days and Crow Daddy wanting to take actionable like movements to make sure that they can sustain their lifestyle as they go further.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love them.
They're so interesting and so cool. And I want to give a huge shout out to Crow Daddy and also to, I think his name is Billy on Dan's end, his friend. Both of them do such a phenomenal job of grounding kind of these wild situations.
Yeah,
and
they're such cool
characters.
parallel characters.
Yeah.
You forget Crow Daddy has powers when he's just being the guy who's the only down-to-earth member of the entire crew minding his business.
And I feel like Crow Daddy does a phenomenal job of, like, when you're watching the Knot scenes, a lot of the time, at least for me, I wasn't like, oh, these are the mischievous bad guys, like overt like they feel like very real characters.
Yeah.
And like what they're doing is fucked up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And when they're in those scenes of doing fucked up shit, you're like, oh God, these people are terrible.
Yeah.
But in the scenes when they're just planning and talking and like hanging out, like it's just very relatable and at times I don't want to say wholesome, but like the way that Crow Daddy supports.
I care them.
It's clear that they have these like actual full lives and stuff with each other. Like I was kind of going to compare them to the Cenobites a little bit because they're a little Hellraiser-ish in their like, you know, torturing people to feed on their life energy thing. Like that's very Hellraiser-ish, right? It's comparable to a handful of other things. They're sort of vampires and stuff, but like they're not as like two-dimensional as the Cenobites are. These are people with regular lives in addition to torturing people to feed on their life force in a way that the Cenobites just are not. Go.
On the vampire front, the original book design, they have one big tooth.
Oh my God,
that's hilarious.
Steven.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Okay, so what I was going to say is the comparison I made for the True Knot while we were watching the movie was to the protagonist gang in Red Dead Redemption 2.
Oh.
Because it just, the feeling of like everyone kind of having their own job and there being internal conflicts and a leader who is out to get whatever the fuck they want to the detriment of the rest of the gang, despite several members pleading with them to stop. But it feels like that. It feels like kind of a family, but in that way. Also, when Rose was like, oh, this is it, this is my white whale, I said Rose the Hat in her Ahab era, and Noah was like, Ahab? And I'm like, yeah, like from Moby Dick. And he's like, oh, I thought you meant like all hats are bastards.
Assigned harpoon.
That's hilarious. What the fuck? Go for it, Nina.
No, go.
Okay, I was slightly gonna shift, but
no, it's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So one thing I really hate in movies is goons that are supposed to have a big emotional moment and then they come out for that big emotional moment. And you're like, what the fuck I don't care about you.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is happening?
To me, you're just henchman number 3. Go away.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit. And I was first introduced to Mike Flanagan through his TV shows, which obviously he has a very distinct style in his shows.
Very much.
There you'll find people kind of complaining about like his monologues and like various other things.
Cowards.
Which
Cowards.
I personally love. But really, like some of the first moments I noticed it is when, what's his name? Longfellow Jim. That's not his name.
Robert Longstreet.
Barry the Chunk.
No.
Barry the Chunk. Thank you, Noah, for knowing exactly who I was talking about. So when Barry the Chunk comes up and is saying like the old guy is kind of passing on, and he's very emotional.
Yeah.
It just really struck me with this sense of like a lot of times like background characters and goons like don't actually have anything going on.
Yeah.
But I feel like in this movie in particular, there's a whole story you can tell with them where I'm like, if this was a show or something and we got to develop, I could very easily see Mike Flanagan doing like an episode where you're getting like background on each of these characters and you're seeing their relationships. There's the 2 members of the Knot who are like obviously a couple and care about each other. And you see that in their like minor transactions with one another kind of in the background. And like all of this other stuff happening, it really evokes this sense of just there's so much happening in the background that we're not seeing.
Yeah.
And even then more with Snakebite Carol or whatever.
Andy.
Snakebite
Andy.
Well,
I could see like in a TV I prefer Mike Flanagan in TV show formats.
Sure.
But
agreed.
He writes things with so much
because
depth.
he
needs more space.
Yeah,
to, like,
you get a lot of that
out.
depth. Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like particularly with Andy, she has so much emphasis in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
And then in the scene where she tells what's his face to kill himself.
Billy.
Yeah.
Which was fucking fantastic scene and so
such
cool.
a good scene.
God, yeah.
But that was the scene that hit me in the gut.
Yeah, and like a TV show format where you're really getting to show Andy and her kind of resentment towards men and her bitterness towards the world and really kind of like flesh that out a bit more in between the scenes of her introduction and her death, and then hitting it with that ending would be fucking beautiful.
And we also would have gotten
so
more
really
from
good.
Billy leading up to that as well. So both their deaths would have been so massively, like they were big enough already as it is, but like, can you imagine
the
how
movie
hard
that we
that
get?
would hit?
Yeah.
Oh,
see, that's what I'm saying. And this is again another comparison with the True Knot and like Found Family and stuff is they are evil X-Men.
Yeah.
We get it's exactly what it is like this kind of nurturing, fostering, using of these powers and everything, where each of these people has their own unique kind of backstory and reason to be doing what they're doing, that kind of meshes with their powers. It's exactly what I love about X-Men. And it's even the kind of conversations in X-Men that are had about mutants are had about people with the Shining in this movie.
Yeah,
the way that Abra
and
Dan talk about people like us and how her parents are afraid of her. It's the exact reason that people who love the X-Men love the X-Men is because of these kind of parallels and like conversations that can be had. And it's fun to see that kind of a story like taken in this direction. And especially with Andy, who, again, like she reminds me of characters like Kitty Pryde or Jubilee, who have like that like kind of foundation of being not taken seriously and taken advantage of in their normal everyday lives, and how they use their powers and their relationships within the team to kind of cope with how they were treated when they were alone. Yeah. And that's why I love Kitty Pryde and Jubilee. And Rogue. And I love Andy for that same reason. She is like hits a type that I really enjoy.
Yeah. Professor Hat's RV for gifted youngsters. I think would be a better name than the Knot. I mean,
the Knot. I do like
why
that.
are they called the True Knot?
Stephen King.
Okay. Like I don't know if they like say anything about that in the director's cut or something like that, but like I spent an awful lot of time in the movie just being like, why are they called this? I want to know, but at the same time, like I'm okay with the fact that they don't tell us.
Yeah, it doesn't make like a whole lot of sense, but from what I can tell, it's literally just that they wanted a cool and creepy name.
Well, I mean, I kind of thought it was sort of a reference to the way that they're like tied together or something like that, or that it was like
because that's
sort of
the most that they say in the
translation of whatever their original name was, because it's kind of implied that they've been around for thousands of years. Well, not even implied, kind of like outright stated that the group as a group, not all the members necessarily,
Grandpa
Flick, but like, Rose talks about Grandpa Flick,
which is a great name.
Rose talks about Grandpa Flick
Dracula,
living to see the rise and fall of empires, to dine on kings and popes. Like, we get the impression that man's been around for a long ass time. So I would assume the True Knot is just like a translation of a different name that they used to have that maybe makes more sense in that when they were early language. But
she said something about watching gladiators in Rome. which is like, yeah, definitely there are other languages spoken here. And again, what kills me, the general consensus in the fandom is when she says there have been myths written about you, everyone kind of agrees that that's Dracula. Which is really funny.
It is.
Dracula now just goes by Grandpa Flick. I adore that.
Count Dracula? No, not anymore.
I haven't used that name in a long time. I go by Grandpa Flick now.
Oh, I'm looking for a guy named Dracula. Well, of course I know him. He's me.
See, the problem is the knot steals the show for me so hard.
Absolutely.
The first time I watched this movie, I fell in love with Rose the Hat.
I mean, she's the prettiest.
She's so pretty. It's like her and like obviously New Pinhead like are just such like amazing villains in my opinion. I love them so much. But on this rewatch, paying more attention to the dynamics that we were talking about, Crow Daddy hit really hard for me.
I love Crow Daddy.
Someone who's trying to reel her in, and I love him so much. But that doesn't mean that the protagonists aren't also extremely full of depth. And I'd like to mention something from the Tumblr post. When talking about casting Danny Torrance, they talked about a bunch of different actors, including like Chris Evans, which would have been a weird one. But
that would have been wild.
That wouldn't have been good.
Even more weird was Matt Smith.
That
Matt Smith.
Terrible. Jesus Christ.
So,
no.
Then Flanagan mentions that Ewan McGregor was also fairly newly sober when they started filming this movie.
Well, it was. I think he said he was 8 years sober when he like.
Which is exactly where Danny hits.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that's like you can tell like kind of that there is that want to tell the story that both Flanagan and McGregor have. Because I love Danny. I will say so McGregor's accent does come out a couple times in little ways, and it's always super charming. Like I can't even be mad about it.
I spent most of the movie thinking, wow, I'm not used to hearing Ewan McGregor sound American, and I'm shocked that he's doing this well.
He did such a good job, and usually it's just the intonations of certain sentences sound very Scottish.
That makes sense.
Meanwhile, Rose the Hat's just straight up Irish, so mostly she was distracting me from anything, because every once in a while she'd say something, and I'm like, oh yeah, Rose is Irish, I forgot.
I had a hard time with Ewan at the very beginning when he had the beard. Because it was like the same length as like Obi-Wan's beard. And like Obi-Wan is very obviously like an iconic character. And he is like somebody I grew up with. And anytime I see Ewan McGregor in a film, it has to kind of compete with that image in my mind of him. And so having that beard is like the same length. I was like, I just feel like I'm watching drunk Obi-Wan right now. But like especially, I mean, once he shaved the beard and everything, I was like, disappeared into the performance for me. And he did a fantastic job. But one thing I love going back to the Tumblr post when Mike Flanagan was talking about interviewing these different actors and kind of giving them auditions and everything. And Ewan kind of came in and sat down with Mike and was like, before we even talk about the script or anything, I really want to talk just about like recovery. And that was the point when Mike was like, yeah, this is the guy. And I absolutely am in love with that, especially with my complaints of Jack from the Shining film, and how they didn't really get that opportunity to kind of show somebody who is struggling with alcohol addiction and recovery. And that's kind of like a plot that was left out of the film. Having that even in the background kind of be like such like an important thing for both the actor and the director / writer of the film is like an incredibly beautiful thing. And seeing that, like, to me, a very important plot point coming in to kind of round out the two film kind of like series as a whole is like an incredibly beautiful thing. And I really fucking love it.
It turns The Shining, which was not a story about recovery, into, well, it could have been, but it wasn't, into it being two movies about the reason Danny is like has got this issue. So it ends up being a 2-movie story about Danny's recovery instead of being 1 movie about Jack's. And I think that the Overlook existing and Jack not having a redemption would have been a low point if The Shining stood on its own as Jack's story. But because it is about Danny's story, I think that they are necessary to be able to set up what Danny's able to do in this movie and tell Danny's story as effectively as it's able to be told.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I just want to give a special shout out to 2 scenes that happen in this movie. The first one being the scene where Ewan McGregor, Danny, is accepting the 8-year pin.
Yeah.
And he's talking about I drank and felt all of these things because when I felt this anger and this addiction, all these things, he was like, those are things from my father. And those were my ways to connect to him.
Mm-hmm.
And then talking about his recovery and also seeing that as a way to connect to his father as this attempt to be better and he didn't get a chance is such a fucking beautiful scene.
It's so good.
And I love it so much. But then coupling that with the scene where he goes into the gold room and he's sitting at the bar and he's talking to Jack.
Yeah.
And the hotel's kind of putting on this face of I'm not Jack, I'm just the bartender.
Yeah.
Lloyd, I don't know what you're talking about. And then that breaks away and you see Jack talking about his addiction and his need for alcohol to survive, kind of just the neediness of the mouths around him. And that kind of monologue is just so good.
Yeah.
And then still Danny being no, I don't need this. And to kind of give into this is to be giving up on 8 years of myself. And then Jack just kind of knocking the glass in anger and then so quickly turning back to proper hotel Lloyd guy. God, I love
it's
that.
Such a good, it's an incredible scene.
Yeah. It's so good. And it doesn't make anything. It's not a retcon. It still completely acknowledges who Jack was in the last movie without trying to soften it or anything, while also, giving him a little more sympathy than maybe The Shining wanted you to give him. Because we're seeing it from Danny and we're seeing it from someone who, who does sympathize with that because that's what he's going through. And he can, maybe when he was 5 months in, he felt that same anger and resentment towards his recovery process and how early on in recovery for almost anything, it's really hard and you kind of feel like you're not making any progress and it feels like you have forever to go before you're actually well. And that's something that I'm sure that Danny was at 5 months, this is the furthest my dad ever made it.
Yeah.
That's so, it's so good.
It's so good.
Also, just in general, all the AA shit in this movie is so well done.
Yeah.
It's on par with, but extremely different from the AA stuff that you see in Midnight Mass. This is just something that Mike Flanagan does incredibly well. Is he knows how to capture the atmosphere of those kinds of rooms and make it as compelling to the viewer as it possibly can be. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Incredible. And for one, just because a lot of times when you're seeing senses of community and those kinds of ways, they're being done through a religious context.
Right, yeah.
And they are done that way in Midnight Mass, to an extent. But in this, seeing Danny connect with the doctor and the doctor kind of pouring into him and having him come work at the hospice, and also seeing I keep forgetting his name.
Billy.
Seeing Billy also as just kind of a support for Danny and kind of really believing in him and helping him and getting him to these steps, and then seeing Billy in the seats as Danny's accepting his 8-year pin is just so beautiful and it's so sweet. And those relationships are just beautiful to me and I love it so much.
The way that Billy is willing to trust Danny when Danny's hey, we're going out and we're digging up a dead body. That was just, Billy.
The little dialogue where he's this is really hard for me because on one hand, if we go out here and there's not something, then my friend is in like serious mental trouble. But like that's almost preferable to us coming out here and there is something, and that means like everything you've told me is true. Like that just Billy had some great monologues.
Billy is so ready to be whatever kind of friend Dan needs at any given point. And like there are multiple scenes where Dan just goes and like wakes him up in the absolute middle of the night, and he'll say, "Don't you know what time it is?" or something like that, but he never gives him a hard time about it.
50-50. Danny doesn't know what time it is. Man's works the night shift. I love Danny's jobs of orderly at the hospice, who also has been kind of accepted as the Charon of like the fucking like afterlife and whatnot. And also the guy who drives the train through Teeny Town. What a combination of things to be doing. Also, what the fuck? That cat is so pretty. That is the prettiest cat I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
For real.
Also, just between the couple different scenes that we see the cat in, the cat does actually age over that 8-year time jump, and I liked that. That's a nice little touch.
I didn't notice that.
Also, I don't know who would have caught this. The cat's name is Azrael.
I was about to say that.
Yeah.
After the Angel of Death, which is something I know because I was a huge nerd about that shit when I was a kid. I've always loved like religious angel shit. So I knew
that because of Diablo, actually.
Oh, you're so valid.
But did you know that the English translation of the name Azrael comes out to like help from God or angel of God, something similar to that?
Makes sense.
I knew that from
That's
Googling
my baby. Sweet baby cat.
But did you know that the doctor's desk in his office, in fact, his whole office is the exact same as the Overlook director?
Yeah, I loved that.
I had no idea.
Oh man,
you right down to the little American flag.
Yeah.
That was so. It was I loved that because the whole time with Jack's interview, he was putting on such a performance, and when Danny was getting his interview, that is the most honest that man has ever been in his life. He's like, I am a mess, and I can see dead things, and
as a further
and the doctor's like, you're hired.
Yeah, and as a further like inverted parallel there, he's talking to a guy who is not trying to deceive him into taking a terrible job, but a guy who wants to help him.
So good.
I just want to give that actor a shout out as well, because like
the Gerald's Game guy
I haven't seen Gerald's Game.
He's Gerald from Gerald's Game.
Yeah, he's the guy with the game.
He does he's in like 2-3 scenes of this movie.
Yeah, he kills it.
But he does such a good job, especially as Danny is talking to him after the meeting and is like, oh, hey, you lost your watch. It's on top of like the soap dispenser and everything. And just as Danny's explaining everything to him, just the look on his face of like confusion and interest and just like everything is just fucking nailed.
Yeah, the way he's just like, I have no idea how you got that information, but I'm gonna go check to see if it's there now. Like,
like that actor's in a bunch of stuff, and I've seen him in like so many things, but I don't know his name. But as he's standing there and he's just kind of looking at Danny as Danny's explaining all of these things and going through it, just the look on his face is like nailed to perfection.
Absolutely.
And is so good. And I love it.
With that in mind and talking about Community, I think something really interesting to take into account when we look at Jack's story versus Danny's is how isolation played so much, not just the Overlook, but isolation played so much into Jack's downfall, and how Danny's salvation was community, that he had these people around him who were willing. And it's not that Jack didn't have anyone. Right. He had Wendy, but he saw her as needy, a mouth to feed, someone always nagging him.
The old ball and chain.
The old ball and chain. His boss was someone who was deceiving him and pawning off a job to him. Danny, everyone in Danny's life is genuinely there for him and puts his needs first. And because of that, Danny is driven to put Abra's needs first. And it's that I read a book when I was a Christian called Love Does, I think it was what it was called. Okay. And it's a collection of stories about like biblical love, quote unquote. And there is a story in there of, I think, the writer turning up at like a youth leader's house in the middle of the night and saying that he needs to just get out of there. And he's sorry and he's saying goodbye. And he's like, my leader said, stay there 1 minute. He went in and he came back with a packed backpack and he's like, all right, where are we going? Aww. And he went with the kid through the whole thing. And it's like that awesome. Story stuck with me because that's the kind of thing that when I was a Christian was why I was a Christian. Right. And it's the stuff that stuck with me after. Yeah. And it's impactful how loving one person can push them to love someone else. And you see that with Danny. And that's like what I love. And it's really interesting to see that as a parallel to Jack, whose entire thing was that he was isolated and that he was like not getting any support.
Which he was getting a lot of support. I mean, Wendy was
I'm not going to downplay partner. Wendy. She was trying so hard and he was denying it at every turn.
Yeah, she was trying to engage with his interest. She was trying to support and encourage him.
And then at that point, she was the one who wasn't getting support. That's like the way that it kind of like Ouroboros into the two of them. Yeah. Poor babies.
I am curious because like I've fucking talked about this last episode kind of, but when we're talking about the perception of relationships, the media around us and everything and the cultural conversations that are happening, I feel like in like the 70s and 80s and like 90s there's the whole like the old ball and chain,
right?
And the toxic masculinity and the need to hide your emotions,
just all the boomer shit
that still exists in certain circles of our generations, like today.
Absolutely.
But like information of like kind of healthy partnership and all of these things and healthy expectations and all of this is way more widely available today and in the past 10 years than it has ever really been. And I'm curious if like Jack and Wendy had gotten together now, if Jack would maybe had approached or like understood that partnership a little bit better and like had been able to take Wendy's support a little bit better than he was at the time. It's really heartbreaking.
Yeah, and that's like, that's why it's like such a good story when you put the two of them next to each other. Because like having watched fucking Turning Red and Encanto and all these kids movies about generational trauma, like it's the same thing of like the position that you were in, the society you were raised in as an older person definitely positioned you to have the worst possible way of addressing these traumas and these addictions. But just because that's true doesn't mean you have to resent me for like, especially in Encanto, how it's like, oh, now you have to use the gift that I've given you the way that I want you to, because I'm the one who got that gift for you. It's like, no, you should, like, the fact that we live in the society we live in now and we're able to recover is a good thing, and it's not something to be resented. And I think this movie does a good job of like, I feel bad for Jack that he didn't have that opportunity in that society, but I'm just so happy for Abra and Danny that they get to live in a world where they're loved.
Can I talk about, to shift things a little bit, since we mentioned Abra, I would love to talk about what I would like to refer to as the horror dial.
Ooh, okay.
I feel like this film does an interesting thing where it points the horror dial between the three different groups. Where we talked about, or I talked about, how the Knot are clearly the antagonists of this film and are like the bad guys. But when you get your scenes with the Knot, you don't necessarily feel like, oh, they're like menacing evil villains constantly. Like you get a very grounded kind of like,
it is fully like a POV shift. You're seeing them the way that they see themselves.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. Thank you, Jeff. And then you see the same thing with Danny and with Abra as well. But then the horror kind of dial flips between them, where you have the horror dial on the Knot when they're kind of torturing the baseball kid. You have the horror dial on Danny at the end when he kind of unleashes all of the ghosts of the Overlook Hotel, and they kind of are tearing into the Hat Lady. But most particularly, and something I would love to talk about, is when the horror dial is on Abra, when Rose is kind of invading her mind and then gets caught and trapped, and she has to deglove her hand to get out. But that entire scene with Abra is terrifying, but most particularly the revelry that Abra takes in seeing Rose kind of like suffer and panic is fucking terrifying. And Rose draws like a really interesting parallel where she's like, you're exactly like me. You just basically don't have the fear of death yet. And kind of like the need to live longer, and you will absolutely turn into me. Is so interesting. And it's something that's not entirely resolved by the end of the film. I mean, you have Danny that's kind of like a ghost and hopefully helping her as she ages to kind of like cope with these things. But I'm really curious if like Stephen King is planning another book following Abra where she really deals with that kind of like struggle of corruption a bit, because that is absolutely something she struggles with, where she enjoys kind of her power over people.
I loved that.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Because I love that in the scene where the child gets the horror focus on her, she is the horror. She's the horrifying thing. And that's another
and it's terrifying.
X-Men, but she's so good. And what I also love is now we like with that in mind, talking about like kind of grooming. I think the fact that Dick and Danny deliberately talked about this, how Danny has someone to guide him and Dick had someone to guide him. Jack never did. Obviously Rose and Andy and all of them had someone to guide them, but it was a very negative influence. And Abra is here having gotten a taste of kind of the True Knots philosophy from Rose. So it's not like she's been untouched by that kind of mindset, but luckily she does also have Danny to be like, fear of death is his whole thing. His entire thing is that he has helped people throughout the best years of his life to not fear death. And I'm like, I love her. And I also think she's scary and powerful and such a cool character. And she was able to help Danny be more powerful too, because he had never tried any of that shit before he met her. And I loved getting to see him kind of explore what he was able to do and like get over it. Because the drinking was also to kind of like dampen the shine. And so when he stops drinking and starts shining, and he still refuses to talk to Abra with his mind and everything, and tells Abra to shut the fuck up as well. Like that moment where he starts exploring that is so cool. And it's so cool that she brought that out in him.
One of the coolest moments of this movie is where Danny's exploring those powers more, when he takes over Abra's body, and he's talking to Daddy Crow Daddy. And he's talking about Crow Daddy's arrogance of like, when you think you're gonna live forever, you don't wear your seatbelt. And then he causes the car to like fucking turn and ram into a tree. Is so good.
That's the most confident we've ever heard Danny sound as well. It's so interesting how his kind of tone of voice changes. And I'd almost, like in any other movie, I'd almost be upset by how differently he talks, except for I feel like I get why he's so confident. Like, I'm
curious. And because that's not, you have scenes where you have actors where you're like, oh, you're being possessed by this other person, and so I need you to act like this person. I'm always curious in those kinds of situations if they have, like in this instance, Ewan, come over here and act this scene.
And then we'll have her
like
just copy what he does.
And then, okay, we need you to basically copy what he does.
I believe that's usually the way that they... I've definitely heard of it being done that way before in the situations that I was like really impressed by how well done it was.
Yeah, it's
great.
I've got an example, but I don't want to name it.
The other interesting thing about the scenes with Crow and also like any scene where a not member dies apart from Grandpa Flick is how easily they die.
Yeah,
they're just normal fucking people. They die normal ways. And that's why I love that comment from Danny of, you're so cocky that you're not wearing a seatbelt.
Yeah.
But my man, a car crash can still kill you. I literally just shot like 6 of your buddies and they all went down like normal ass people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good. And I love the way they die. And I love that, like, it seems like what's so funny is that it seems like death is not the end for regular people who die and can go on in this afterlife that exists in the Shining world. It seems like death, for all that the Knot is afraid of it, is actually the end for them. If they had just not gotten into this fucking cult, maybe they could have gone on after death like everyone else. But because they're so afraid and they want to keep on living, it
to
seems
join
like
the Knot, it seems like they have to die anyway.
Yeah, it's almost like they're already in their afterlife. So when that ends, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is so wild because that might not, like, it seems like that's not necessarily the case for everyone else. Because, like, Dick seems to move on, but, like, in a calm way where he's, like, had the time to accept it.
Because he comes back to visit.
Yeah, he comes back to watch over Danny and stuff.
Jack is trapped in the Overlook. Rest in peace. Yeah. But like it's interesting. It's so interesting the way that the afterlife works in this world and how the Knot in running from death seem to have killed themselves more thoroughly than anyone else in this universe.
Yeah. Speaking of, I forget, but there was something you said that made me think of this.
Okay.
You talked about this a little bit before of how Danny's mind palace is of the Overlook. And I saw Mike Flanagan reblogged something on Tumblr as I was kind of like scrolling through his Tumblr looking for his post about Dr. Sleep.
I think I know the post you're talking about,
Yeah, it was a post talking about how it's really interested seeing how the Mind Palace for Abra is her room and the Mind Palace for Rose is like this crazy fucking mansion kind of place. And it's these places of comfort and safety and knowing, whereas Danny's Mind Palace is the Overlook Hotel, and how much that kind of speaks to the trauma that has affected his life, and how everything in his past, present, and future is like seen through the trauma that he experienced in the Overlook Hotel, and it's compartmentalized in the Overlook Hotel. And how it views his perceptions and all of these other things, and it's super fucking cool. It was a really good post.
Cool. It was a good post. Yeah. If you check which I do this for every movie we watch. I know I've mentioned it. I always check the Tumblr tag for the movies we watch because there are takes in there that are really good. There's fan art in there that are really good. There's also some shitty stuff. Did you know there is maybe it's just one person. Maybe it's a community. Someone is shipping Rose the Hat with Rorschach from Watchmen. And they are making high quality edited GIFs for this. It's
interesting.
Incredible. It's the most content I could find from her was that.
I'm going to say it. Okay. They belong together. I think they deserve each other.
I feel like
I can
Rorschach
see it. That's
would
wild.
hate that.
Isn't that funny?
Oh, I think he would, but I think he deserves it.
I think that Rose and Crow Daddy are really good together because, like, I really do like their relationship. They do. She seems annoyed. It's a really interesting parallel to Jack and Wendy because he comes to her with things and she's openly annoyed at first, but then once she takes in what he's presenting her, she takes his feelings seriously. She praises him when he does things that are actually helpful. She never apologizes, but she's still not as bad as Jack. And we
always have a little room for growth, you know?
We do. We do. I also love Andy so much. This is just something I'm putting out there based on the way that Andy acts. And I'm sorry for saying this because I feel it really strongly. Andy has turf energy.
Aw.
She has baby turf energy.
Ooh.
Her kind of ideology and the way that she acts around Rose seems like it's slowly leading into that. But I did love the scene where she meets Rose and Rose gives her a truth serum, and Andy's immediately like, "You are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life." And I'm like, God, me too.
I loved
Andy.
Rose's response to that as well. The way she's just like, "Oh, that works a little too well, doesn't it?"
Yeah.
And later it seems like she is like it's upsetting because we know that Andy is 15. The actress is very clearly not.
Oh yes, definitely.
No, she was
what?
She was around that
Really?
age at the time. She's
Really?
20 now.
Oh
Yeah.
wow, jeez.
Huh.
Interesting. I did not know that. But yeah, no, like it seems to me that Rose does let Andy go a little bit too far with that kind of relationship that she is kind of projecting there, especially in the scenes where they're feeding. It seems like they get carried away. But
Yeah.
I did really forget where I was going with this. The Tumblr tags.
Yeah,
That's-
I would have loved, because like talking again about giving Mike Flanagan room to breathe and room to do his thing is just so fucking good. And I feel like I don't know that Mike Flanagan would have wanted to add a whole lot to Dr. Sleep as a story, but if this was like a Mike Flanagan original sort of thing and he got to flesh out kind of the side characters of the Knot, Andy's story is something I would have in particularly loved to seen more of.
Yeah.
And seen, because I feel like we hinted at this a little bit, I think in the trigger warning segment of just a bit of, I forget words, but kind
Predatory
of controlling
behavior?
of predatory behavior. She was definitely very much coerced into joining the
very
Knot.
much.
Mhm.
She was under the influence of various drugs, and she was kind of told like, say yes here and like sign here, and
She
put
was
your
completely
initials here.
misled as to what, with careful wording from Rose, as to what she was
She
actually
wasn't-
signing up
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, she wasn't told the truth because she was like, you said it wouldn't hurt, and she was like, well, it doesn't hurt now.
Yeah.
And you said we'd live forever. No, I didn't. I said eat well, live long.
Yeah. And I feel like seeing that story kind of expanded upon more is something I would have fucking loved to
Right.
see.
Because that would be really interesting how she goes from viewing men as these like villains and knowing that she is someone who is victimized by men constantly. And because of that, kind of stumbling into a situation where she is victimized by a woman. And it would be very interesting to see, since she's clearly picking up in what we do get to see of her, picking up on the fact that she was lied to. It would be really interesting to see if this person that she's kind of now idolized because she isn't the kind of person who used to victimize her, if her like breaking out and realizing that she has been preyed on once again. I would, you're right. I'd love to see that storyline.
And like similarly, kind of seeing that flipped on its head, but also after she, I don't know how many of you noticed this, but after she talked to, I've had a few drinks. After she talked to Rose, and she was like, I thought you said it wouldn't hurt. And Rose was like, well, it doesn't anymore, blah, 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 blah. And then Rose takes Andy to the rest of the group. The first thing that happens when Rose joins the rest of the group is Grandpa Flicks kind of like pulls her into this big hug. And we see later on in the film that like Grandpa Flick's death does have an effect on Andy. And I think seeing like that relationship between her and like this older man, and potentially like a bit of a mentor would have been like so cool to see.
Been so interesting because
and there's so many good scenes that could have happened there. And then seeing her kind of like fall back on her ways as like just a man hater when she tells Billy to kill himself as she's dying. Like there's so many good,
so
like,
many
And
good
the
poetic-
fact that
opportunities.
even without
It's so
having to get
good.
into all of it, Mike manages to give us enough that we can infer all of this.
Oh yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, that's
It's
so
so
true.
good.
Like he didn't have to
It's
give us
so
all of those
good.
scenes. We know they happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
just-
so
I-
true.
But I want to
Right,
see
yeah,
that.
definitely.
Literally. The thing is, I don't know that I want like a Dr. Sleep the series. I think I just
Yeah.
want the True Knot the series.
I I would kind of love to see what would have happened if prior to doing Dr. Sleep, Mike Flanagan had been given the go-ahead to do like a 1-season show of The Shining, which was like similar to like what Stephen King did back in like the that 90s or whenever that was. I feel like he could have done something really, really cool with that, and I would have loved to see what that would have been.
Well, when he made Dr. Sleep, there were 2 series that he was tentatively signed on for, depending on how Dr. Sleep did. And because Dr. Sleep bombed theatrically, those were scrapped.
Well,
one of which was
be honest,
I didn't want either of these.
What were they?
One
I didn't have time to read the entire
Overlook
post,
prequel.
A what prequel?
Overlook.
An Overlook Hotel prequel.
Oh, yeah, I don't want that.
The other was a Dick Halloran spinoff.
I don't even.
I don't think I would have loved either of those. My thing is, that's my thing, is the studios never know the stories that we actually want to see. I feel that way about a lot of the Star Wars shows that are getting made.
Sure.
Is like,
I mean, Andor was fantastic.
I heard Andor was amazing. And that's part really of the good. Andor and The Mandalorian are like stories that I would think would be interesting instead of stuff like Obi-Wan, or when we eventually get something for Ahsoka, or like all this stuff that feels like they think they know what the audience wants versus the stuff that might be more of a wild, like the Boba Fett series was so bad. And then you have The Mandalorian, which is about a nothing character that no one knew anything about.
Yeah, just world expanding
and Andor,
stuff.
which is about a side character in a one-off movie. And it's like,
the times that they do these stories that add to things and add to the universe, fantastic, from a realm of like little to no knowledge of. But the times where they've kind of been like, oh, this is a fan favorite character, let's like do something with them, like those have not turned out well.
No,
which historically is, if you followed like the Star Wars extended universe, like books and everything, that's always how it was. They were all just world expanding things, and that was awesome.
If you give someone the world sandbox to play in, then that's another thing. Like, there's so many examples of this, because like Doctor Who has this with Blink being like the best episode, and the Doctor's only in it a little bit. Like, there's a lot of stuff where it's like, you've created a really cool world, you've told a really cool story, and now it's the perfect sandbox to kind of just explore elements you weren't able to see in the main story. And instead of going back to the same characters, like, not to like get into my own shit, but this is something that like I definitely feel like with the world that I've built for my fantasy stuff, is this trilogy is all that I want to tell about these characters. But I have a few short stories written already that kind of just pop around to different eras, to different like characters, to different regions we don't get to see in the main trilogy. And that's like the fun shit to me. It's like, and I like it as a reader, and I like it as a writer, and I want more, please. But I wouldn't like an Overlook Hotel.
Like J.R.R. Nina's writing the Silmarillion over here.
That's like the exception to the rule.
That's like one thing that I hope kind of takes off, and that I think Marvel is starting to kind of like put a little bit of potential interest in culturally, is just like 45-minute specials. Because they had like Werewolf by Midnight, they've got the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, and they'll have these other like one-off stories where I think there are a lot of properties that could benefit from these one-off stories, but instead they feel like, we have to do an entire like show or movie about like this one person or thing. And that's just like too much time. But like, for instance, with The Knot, I feel like you could do a whole ass show about The Knot and really explore those relationships and stuff. And I feel like a little bit more could be done with Abra and her family specifically. Because one thing that we've kind of learned about through like The Shining, and you all might know a little bit more than me, but from my read, it seems to be something that's inherited biologically.
It looks like it,
where Dick's grandma had it, Jack had it, and just wasn't really aware. I'm curious, like, and this is something I'd love to see, is Abra's family and who she inherited it from, and kind of like that relationship. And I don't think there's enough for that for like a full ass show, but like a 40-minute special where we're seeing more about Abra and her family dynamic and maybe her parents' reaction to her like powers, and then that calling back to one of their kind of like childhoods and seeing these strange things. I feel like it's absolutely something that could be done in like 40 minutes. You could absolutely like show that in a really compelling and interesting way.
It could
There's
be.
a fun...
I'm going to be honest,
something
I really don't want that personally, but
Yeah.
But if like they were to do like a Dr. Sleep, like the Shining kind of expanded universe, and there was a story that they wanted to do with Abra, I would 100% prefer that over
grown-up Abra running around.
Or a movie.
Yeah. One thing that so a fun like running theory in the kind of Shining thing. There's the theory that it's like a paternal like thing, but that doesn't work with Dick's grandma. But the other theory is that it gets stronger every generation that it's passed down, which is another reason that the fucking not hunting it out of existence is really bad for them, is because if they had just kind of sat back, it's possible that they could have ended up with stronger people. But if that were to be the case, then whoever Abra's getting it from would have to be pretty powerful, because Abra's like, I love that. One thing, sorry.
You're fine. Go for it.
One thing about Abra that I love is that this is the kind of character that people would call Mary Sue's if she didn't have that, what Emma brought up, of that just like kind of rabid, terrifying aspect of her where she seems to know that she's powerful. Because I think part of the Mary Sue problem is that they want to pretend that they aren't special, even though they are. Abra knows she's special. She's not a dick about it. But when she gets carried away,
she doesn't shy away from it at all.
Oh my God. I love that. I want more of that, because everyone always wants the powerful girl character to be shy and demure. And instead with Abra and with Rose, we have powerful people who relish in their power. Good guy or bad. And I really, 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 really like that.
Yeah, it's great. I'm a big fan.
I
don't remember what I was going to say.
I wanted to say, we do need to
final thoughts from everybody then?
It was a great movie. I like it a lot.
Real great.
Real good movie.
I've got like one final thing that I meant to bring up like forever ago, back when we were talking about Dan with the watch. I love that just as like a character moment for him, because between that and a handful of other things that we see from him in those earlier parts of the movie, just the way that he's about to walk away from the dude, and then he like comes back to tell him about his watch, and the way that Ewan McGregor acts it feels like, even though losing a watch and being a little bit bothered by it is like such a minor thing, it feels like it was like hurting him to walk away from him without telling him where his lost watch was. Even though that's such a minor thing.
Absolutely.
And between that and a handful of other stuff that we see, like, you know, the vision that he has of like the dead kid and everything, it feels like The Shining has been such a curse to him for his entire life, because he is constantly aware of all the troubles of everyone around him. And if there is something that he can do, he just can't stand not to be doing it. And it reminds me of this book that I read when I was a kid that I don't remember if it was based on some Greek mythology or an Anglo-Saxon legend or what. I want to say it was like connected to Beowulf, but I might be remembering wrong. But it was the story of this character who like read minds, right? But it wasn't that he could read minds, it was that he had to. He couldn't shut it off. He was always hearing the minds of everyone around him. So it was obviously, you know, an effective tool every now and then, but overall primarily a curse. And that story, even though I don't remember what the book was called or who the character was or what the origin of it was, that particular character and that like issue that he had to live with has stuck with me so hard. And that's exactly what is happening with Dan in this movie so clearly. I fucking love that.
Yeah. My last thoughts. For one, I just love this movie. It's great. Great time. I've also just really love talking about it. I feel like most of the time when we talk about movies, I have like one interesting thing to say, and the rest of the time I'm waiting for like a funny joke to say. But particularly with this, I've had so much to talk about, and I've really enjoyed
it. There's so much in it.
But I'm really, I know all of you are aware, but maybe the audience isn't. So Mike Flanagan has had the rights to produce or to do like a Dark Tower series for a bit now. And for one, like he announced it on like Twitter, Tumblr or something, but he also announced it on TikTok. And if you haven't seen the TikTok of him talking about it, it's just so wholesome. Because like he's talking about it, he has this huge like smile on his face as he's talking about it that just is incredibly genuine, and that he's really excited about it and really happy, and like he can't contain himself. But he talked on a Tumblr post recently of somebody was being like, "Oh, I'm so excited to hear you have the rights for the Dark Tower, and I'm so excited to see what you're gonna do with it." And he was like, "Yeah, we've got to find somebody who's willing to make it first." And this kind of comes in with like how little I know about how TV comes to be.
Right.
But I know he just Intrepid Pictures, which is kind of like his production company with like a friend of his, just signed a huge deal with Amazon. And so I hope Amazon is like, yeah, let's make this.
Yeah.
And they put it there, but we'll have to see. But I really hope that gets made because I think he could do some really cool stuff with it. I'm excited.
I am glad that Mike Flanagan genuinely enjoys Stephen King's work. And I think this may be the only time that's really hard for me to just allow people to like things that I think are objectively bad. But seeing how happy he gets about it, I'm like, yeah, maybe Stephen King is onto some things sometimes. But then I snap right back into it where I'm like, I fucking hate that. I love the stories that he is capable of telling in his imagination. Yeah. I hate the way that he tells those stories.
I feel like
which is why I like the Flanagan's adapting things, because I love the way Flanagan tells stories.
I feel like him and Flanagan are a really great partnership.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Yeah, because I feel like Flanagan's creative force of adapting things into visual medium is fantastic.
He's very good at it.
And I think it balances some of the more rough edges of King.
King just doesn't know where to stop on certain things and when not to add stuff. I think he's someone who's very self-indulgent about adding things into what could, if it were a tighter storyline, be very good. What is it, Jeff?
Stephen King was famously on an awful lot of cocaine during his prime creative years.
Yeah.
That's a thing to
keep.
And
none of his editors ever told him not to do the thing.
No, they didn't.
But he was off cocaine when he wrote Dr. Sleep.
Right, yeah.
I have not read Dr. Sleep.
Right.
But I've also not heard amazing things about Dr. Sleep.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I will give a little allowance for cocaine.
Sure.
I will. But a lot of things that I love were created while on immense amounts of cocaine. So I'm not going to give him all the music that my dad let me listen to when I was a kid, for instance.
Well, your dad should have had you listening to weed music like a good dad, because
that really is the difference between you and I, Jeff. Is I listened to
I had a weed
music
dad
when I was a kid, and you listened to weed.
And that's why
anyway,
I like
on
Pink
that,
Floyd.
let's get into. And that's why I like AC/DC. Let's get into the notes.
Oh,
this
shit,
is where I'll do
notes.
my final thoughts
forgotten.
because the
Noah
notes
has
are
final
here.
thoughts before.
No, I don't.
Oh, the notes
they'll pop
are
up
your
in
final
the
thoughts.
notes.
Okay, cool. Off we go.
I don't know what my final thoughts will be, but Nina will say something, and I'll
Noah's,
see a much better note.
I was going to say.
Oh,
I'm excited.
No, I do have a final thought.
Oh my God, here he
goes. So the point I took off this movie, I decided I was more happy with being uncomfortable with the lack of soundtrack, as a general term, in Kubrick's Shining. There was a lot of musicless moments.
A lot of silence, yeah.
And there was just like, I didn't think about that until I watched Danny rolling around in his little tricycle, and there was music and the rolling sound, and I did not like that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you got my example I wrote down is you got stuff like Star Wars that lives and dies on a leitmotif.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because the entire movie is useless if the soundtrack doesn't harken back here and there to like tell you what's going on.
Every character has their theme that comes back every time they do something, and yeah.
And I don't think this movie needed as many ambient music tracks as it had.
Okay.
Mhm.
But I loved when it brought in some like intentional strong moments.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I agree. Yeah. Okay. It's time for Noah's notes. Here we go.
Yay.
Noah says, I like when movies are sequels to older stuff and they use the older style company logos. I really liked when they did that. This is Nina. I really liked when they did that with Into the Spider-Verse and they did a bunch of fun stuff with the logos. It could just be anything fun with the logos. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, just don't make the logos boring.
Yeah. Noah says, God, Rose the Hat is so hot, which is the mood for the movie.
Yep.
Oh, man. Noah says, one thing I love about this movie is how you see them marking like the thermoses that they keep the steam in with trinkets to show who was who.
Yeah.
Like that, they don't need to, they kind of need to do that because it seems like they're a higher quality steam to lower quality steam. But the trinkets thing is morbid and super fun.
Yeah.
There's some music comments, so we don't need to talk about that.
Every now and then I glance at a note, but then Nina freezes up and I'm like, Nina got flashbanged by the note.
No, none of. I mean, Psychic Piano.
That was
is
exactly the one I knew you were stuck on.
I did need to like get past that. The short ones are more fun. Noah says, white people be like, I just love traveling so much. It's like my whole personality. And then they make a weird cult that eats children's souls. Yeah. Rose the Hat's vibe, especially in the final scene where she hits the overlook, is like Instagram, like crunchy granola mom.
Very much.
Hashtag wanderlust on every single post.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Van life. She would kill on
I
TikTok.
really want to know
life.
how old each of them actually are.
I really do want to know.
Yeah.
That's another thing
we've
I'd love to
got
know.
an easy 2,000 years on Grandpa Flick.
Maybe more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Easy.
Maybe more.
Because that's assuming he was born when Jesus was born.
He probably knew him.
He is Jesus.
He is. That would not be. You know what?
My favorite part of the Bible was when they talked about how incredibly tall Jesus was all the time.
See, that can't be it because Stephen King, I believe, is religious now.
He is, yeah.
So he would not write that in.
I did hear he was religious before he wrote Dr.
Yeah.
Sleep, and that is part of something that like played into Dr. Sleep's writing. I heard that when it came out, which was weird. The book came out in 2013, by the way. The book is as of fucking today, 10 years old. It's not literally like the birth date of the book, but I did realize that it's 2023 now. But yeah, no, I would love to know how old they are because I'd love to know because Crow Daddy's obviously indigenous. I would love to know because it's mentioned that a certain grandpa came over on a boat to the New World. I would love to know when he and Crow Daddy met. I'd love that story.
Did Grandpa Flick come over on? Was he? He
I
wasn't
don't know,
on the Mayflower.
The Santa Maria.
On the Mayflower. Like those people weren't fun.
Maybe he was.
He would have been traveling
He was with
fun
Columbus.
people. So, I hope
maybe
he wasn't with
he's not
Columbus. That would have sucked.
Hispanic.
I don't think he's Hispanic. He travels, man.
No, I'm just like trying to. I was thinking.
I would
like,
imagine that he wouldn't travel with like an expeditionary force.
Yeah, but with
because
settlers, probably.
you wouldn't know what's on the
like
other
settlers,
side,
yeah.
and he needs to like be sure that he has food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Roanoke.
And he can't
did
like
Roanoke.
guarantee like if I go to
He
the
did
New
Roanoke.
World,
Roanoke was an inside job.
I would
I'm
imagine
so
he would have
sorry.
waited a little bit to confirm that there were actually like people over there that he could feed off of.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's what interests me. That specifically, the relationship between Crow Daddy and like when the True Knot hit like the New World, quote unquote, is so interesting to me. That's the story I want to know. I'm so upset. Anyway, I just need to read more X-Men comics is what I need to do because I could get everything I need from that. Noah says, God damn it, I love seeing the red rum on the wall. It's in the mirror. The pure panic it elicits, the fact that Danny's clearly off his gourd about seeing it. Poor baby boy. Like, the fact that she somehow, it must be because of their connection, she knows, like, subconsciously exactly how he wrote that shit, and it's exactly how it comes into the wall. Oh my God. Noah says, we cannot call this man Crow Daddy. Stephen, please, I'm begging you. I disagree. I think that there is no other name for for that man. That man is Crow Daddy. They're like, I don't think
I feel like they
Thank you, Jeff,
could have
for the
called him
faces.
any number of things that might be better than Crow
I
Daddy.
look at that man.
I know you
The
look at
names
that
of
man
the-
and you call him Crow Daddy. I know, but like,
But like, look at Rose. Rose's name is Rose the Hat. Her name's not exactly better.
none of their names are.
They
I
call him Crow
I
for short.
criticized all of their names earlier. Where were you?
Right. I just think that they all fit for what the characters are.
Barry the Chunk? Really?
Yeah, Look at that man and tell me there's something else you'd call him.
Your note of Red Rum reminded me of another thing that I wanted to say that I thought was fun. That's not really shown in the movies, but in The Shining, you talked about how Tony was actually Danny from the future, kind of warning him about going to the Overlook Hotel and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the scene where Danny is with what's her face? God,
Abra?
I'm terrible with names. Abra. And Abra was like, originally I thought you were my imaginary friend, and he was like, oh, that's funny because I had an imaginary friend. And the fact that he's the imaginary friend for Abra when he was also the imaginary friend to himself is like really cool and interesting. And I thought
that was going to get mentioned at some point, but they never really.
No, it doesn't. And what's interesting is like, because that is something that was only explicitly said in the book of The Shining, I'm pretty sure. I'm wondering, like, if I were to like try and canonize it in the movies, I would say it's a post-death thing for him, where the way that he visits Abra, he's able to kind of like maneuver through time in a way.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But yeah, because there is no point in this movie where I think this man is mentally well enough prior to his death to try and do anything like that.
No way.
Noah says, fuck man, the crackling crunch noise when the caravan turns on the road. Yeah, there's like a backbreaking, like spine cracking noise when the caravan turns when Abra's kind of getting her visions of them. And I really love that. Noah, guy looking too deep voice. The older ladies walking side by side as Abra got off the bus are a reference to the twins from The Shining.
Which honestly is probably intentional.
Yeah, potentially.
You guys. Noah has a note here about the names again.
Yeah.
I've already said it out loud. We don't need to read
it's
that.
really funny to me that these two notes are right after each other. First of all, you got the wrong angel name.
I don't give a fuck.
This man has been playing too. He did.
No.
He did. He did do it. He's been playing too much Binding of Isaac. I think that's what's happening here. Am I wrong?
How about you read the next goddamn note?
Noah says he has a note about the names, and then the next name is I want a pet so I can name it something like he does say Azazel. So,
it's
but he meant
Azazel,
Azrael.
actually.
Azazel.
Don't
What is
give a
this fucking
shit.
supernatural? You pronounce everything wrong. Come on.
No,
Yeah.
it's Binding of Isaac, and I pronounce everything wrong.
Noah says, okay, so Abra's face being blurred out and having the same hair as her anime figure is really fun. That's something that Noah noticed. It is also something that everyone has pointed out as being hey, Mike Flanagan, are you a fucking weeb or something?
Of course he is.
Because his kind of choice of which animes Abra is a fan of is really interesting. I think there's a Ruby reference in there somewhere as well.
There are multiple Ruby references.
Yeah, so that's really interesting and kind of funny. And then finding out he was a Whovian was the least surprising thing in my life. Noah says, I enjoyed the casual mentioning of the fact that the Knot has contacts in government organizations. I don't really want to expand on that too much, but I did find
Jeff,
that really
you did
interesting.
miss that. It's
in
an
the
extended
director's,
scene bit.
Dead Meat talked about it.
Got it.
Noah mentions that Lloyd poured the same whiskey for Danny, and then seconds later, not even, Danny's like, this is my dad's whiskey.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
jot that down.
Yeah, I liked that.
Lloyd clearly only able to hold a conversation with somebody like Jack. No, I think that's true, but I think it's also just that he's only able to hold the conversations that the hotel wants him to have. And that has nothing to do with who he's talking to.
No, but that's why I said like with
Right.
someone like Jack, because Dan did not want to have the same kind of conversation,
Right.
so he just keeps getting the same one-liners.
Oh my God, I
over and
forgot
over.
about this. So Noah and I, when in the director's cut, there's a scene where Jack and Danny are talking in the red bathroom that Grady and Jack had a conversation in. And Jack says the phrase, management is concerned. And why don't you, and like bring her here and then let things happen. And that, given that the hotel seems to know about both Abra and Rose, the vagueness of his phrasing seems like he could either be saying, bring Abra in and let me have Abra, or bring Rose in and I'll take care of this problem. He says the hotel says either way, this is not something you should be involved in. Like, I'm not really
Easiest
sure.
thing a man can do.
Literally, the hotel is like, why did you come back? I had like been trying to follow you for years and like you were not fucking having it. And now you're back. Basically the vibes I got was the hotel was like, if I were in your position, I would not be fucking involved and I would just let them sort their own issues, which was a really interesting conversation because it did feel like a direct conversation, the only one we get between the hotel and Danny. And I loved it. It's not necessary to the story, but I really love the double meaning of like, let us have her, could be Rose or Abra, and it ends up being Rose. The hotel doesn't make any overt moves on Abra until it's taken both Rose and Danny, which could just be proximity, but it's also very interesting to me.
That is very interesting.
Noah says, and this will be the last one, Rose on a sightseeing trip at the place, hitting all the big spots, the blood elevator. She sees the
I
fucking
love the way
blood
she
elevator.
looks at the blood
and
elevator. She's just like, oh, neat.
And then she still, when she sees Danny, is like, how did I miss you? Bitch, how do you think he brought you to the world's only blood elevator? Do you think he just like somehow vaguely knew about that? Or maybe he had a traumatic experience with the blood
love that.
elevator?
It's just like, he brings her to the haunted house of America, and she's just like, I don't care about the haunted house that is malevolent a force in, like, you though? Where were you?
Yeah.
That was really interesting, seeing the difference between her entering and Abra entering. Where earlier, Nina, you were talking about kind of the power difference between the two of them. And I thought it was really interesting seeing like the power difference between them, where when Abra walked in, she was like, this place is like a cancer. This is terrible. It feels awful. And then when Rose walked in, I feel like the way she was looking around, she could sense something was like a bit off, but she couldn't place it entirely. Super interesting.
And it seems
and I
like
thought it was really cool.
It seems like while Abra took that as her cue to be worried about Danny, indicating that she does think that she could take the hotel, and that leads to her being confident enough to stay and try and take care of Danny. Rose thinks she's confident enough to take the hotel, and that leads to her completely underestimating it and being her downfall, which is really interesting because, again, they are very similar to each other. But Abra's doing it for Danny, and Rose is doing it because she's a fucking bitch, and I love it. What did fucking Crow Daddy calls her his bitch queen of all time, and he is
something
so
like that.
right, and I love that. All right, but that is it for Noah's notes. God, I could talk about this movie. I said it on Twitter, but this is the first time where I've been like, thank God I have the podcast to talk about this, because otherwise I would either turn to blogging or I'd write a video essay I'd never film. I'm so glad we have this to just get all of this out there.
One last thing. I
love just talking about this
love
shit.
the way that when they go back to the hotel, all the shots are suddenly all like Kubrick-y and stuff, and it kind of lends the impression that like that's not the way that movie looked, that's the way that place looks. Like that's the effect that the place has, is it just seems like that. I fucking love that. I could talk about that shit for hours.
Genuinely.
Good
But thank you for listening to Casual Obsession, the horror movie podcast where we talk about movies
For 2.5 hours.
not normal movies, horror movies. If you wanna hear us talk about things, I'm Noah. You can find me at Bubbadabad, BUBBADABAD, on any social media I happen to be on.
Yes, and I'm Nina. Thank you for listening to me talk. And if you want to hear more of my thoughts, You can find me at Nina Wolverina on Twitter and Instagram and Hive. I'm trying to be active on Hive, but I gotta be honest, after being used to, this is gonna make me sound like a dick, after being used to getting interaction on Instagram and Twitter, to try posting to Hive and just be met with jack shit every time has been discouraging. I'm still trying to post over there though. So
Hive's 1 month death really killed it.
It did kind of kneecap it, but I am still hopeful because I do like the algorithm, or the user interface rather.
I think it needs a little bit more time.
Just a little, but I think it's got potential. On the other hand, you can follow me on Tumblr at Nina Wolverina with a 3, where the E should be. That's where I would say I am currently the most active horror-wise. So if you like my horror takes and cool fan art, I am very good at sniffing out the cool fan art. So follow me there.
Yeah. And I'm Emma. You can find me at Emma Panada on Twitter and Hive and Twitch. I talk a lot about TTRPG things, so if you go there looking for horror opinions, you probably won't find them. You can just keep listening to the podcast, and that's where I talk about horror stuff. I'm also in charge of the horror Twitter account, which is Casual Horror Pod, and I need to get back to posting on there more often. I'll probably post about our Flanuary episodes a lot because I love our friend Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike. I'm really excited to talk about all these things, so I'll probably boost them a lot online.
And I'm Jeff. You can find me on Tumblr at What Is It You Pray For, where I am doing my best to actually post there, but I just keep not doing it so far. I guess you can still find me on Twitter at Bubba if you wanna. I'm not realistically. I'm not gonna post there ever again. I might as well just shut the account off. I'm only there because some of my friends still are. So like, meh. Actually, Flanuary stuff. Things to watch out for on future episodes of the podcast. I have just started reading the book, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson.
Ooh.
And I will be coming back with my thoughts on that as I get further into it, because I got this really beautiful hardcover edition of it for Christmas from my mom. Yeah.
Aw, shout out to Mom.
Good gift.
I also
shout out to Mom.
Go Linda, go.
Yeah.
I got a Daryl Gregory.
Also, yeah.
I don't think. Yeah, so I'm very excited to, and I will also maybe we'll do a book ghouls. Gab the book ghouls
for Flanuary.
For Flanuary.
Damn, Linda, where was my cool book gift?
Speaking of Flanuary,
we are watching Oculus next.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
Content warning, mirrors.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything else, but boy howdy, I hate mirrors.
This movie has been on my list for such a long time, and I'm excited to finally watch it and talk about it.
Me too. So we'll do that next time. In the meantime, stay spooky.
Bada bing, bada boom.